Hey everybody, this is Jason Bosch, and I'm here with Allison once again. And something really nice happened. Someone made a really cool zine based on Allison's work, and so she wanted to do a live stream just to talk about this, and also to talk a little bit about just media in general, like how we interact with social media. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but like I think people really need to like. Well, you don't need to do anything. You can do whatever you want, but it would be very, it would be
If
very
you listen
useful
to Jason.
if I were in charge. No, like thinking about how we're very passive consumers, even in the alt media space, and everyone's just sharing everybody else's information. And if you think about it, there's not a whole ton of original research going on. And people are just sharing other people's stuff, and even like on social media, you look at your news feed, and then you just share what's on there, and so it becomes like kind of a bubble. And I guess I'm trying to convince people to be more proactive in both the media that they consume, and also to start creating your own media, like original stuff. So we've already got a couple things on here. Hello, everyone. This was an impromptu, so it wasn't planned. But Allison, do you want to just say a little bit about this zine that was created? And I can actually
Yeah,
bring it up here.
sure. So this was created by Eve. I'm just going to say her first name because that's all that she has on there. I don't know if she wants her whole name out and about. But I met Eve in person. I think she had followed some of my work online when she was visiting in Philadelphia, and we were doing like an informational picket connected with a teacher from Constitution High School who was protesting some of the health policies. It's been over a year, and so we were out a couple weeks in a row, and I met her in person there, and we got to know each other a little bit. And so she mentioned at the time that she was interested in working on a project like this, and which was great. But there's a lot of times where people, and even myself, like I have grand ambitions for projects that I want to do, and it doesn't always like fully develop. So and we hadn't really stayed in touch. And then just a few days ago, she sent an email, and it was like done, and it was pretty amazing. So, if people have been following my work, I realize that art, it feels really much like art and creative, the arts, visual arts, musical arts, theatrical arts, poems, songs. Like if we can translate these hard concepts, we'll be much further ahead than just with my long form, sloggy 100-slide videos. And I tried to do a little bit of like a little video animation with construction paper cutouts like 4 or 5 years ago, and my artistic ability is so limited. And I often said, I was like, I just want this like as a zine. I'd love to have a zine of this. And yeah, and then it happened. It just came out of the blue, which was a really nice surprise because I've been trying to readjust of being out of the mainstream media, like the Twitterverse, and I've been off of Facebook land for a long time, and just reconstructing your identity, like feeling that you have this message to share, not knowing how to do it the most effective way, and trying to sort of wean yourself off of this sort of self-reinforcing identity hamster wheel that we were on. So I was a bit, I've been transitioning the last month or so, and just trying to figure out like, what do I do next? Like how can we be effective in telling this story that weirdly still there are huge pieces that 2.5 years later don't seem to be centered in the conversation. So it was a really nice surprise. And, I wanted to, have a chance to share it with people in case they didn't see it on my blog. And, we can include a link to the download or the PDF so that people can access it in the comments when we're done today. But thank you, Eve. It's wonderful. And I just wanted to sort of walk through and talk about some of the bits as we go along.
Yeah, great. And by the way, if I have to, I'll have to mute myself, but I've got a little bit of a cold here, so bear with me if you're wondering
Oh,
why my voice sounds a little rough here. But yeah, so you want to just walk through this a little bit, Allison?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting. One of my early blog pieces when I was focused on educational technology. I actually talked about like data mining children as the new oil. So I think this is a really apt initial image there of this oil gusher. And then, our friend Lynn, who's very active in Dallas, Texas is a real center, the most data mineable area, from when we were down in Austin about, mining children for their data. So that was a really good way to start off, is understanding the next type of economic construct. And then I think this initial image, so we've been promised a new normal where we will build back better. And then there are these smaller images with the rescue plan, supply chain disruptions, rent increases, online learning, and QR codes. And then there's a temperature gun thing. And so I think this is really nice because it does show that it was never just a health event, that this was including all aspects of our lives, from housing to training to food systems. And it captures all of that in one sort of nice image. And the QR codes are central.
Sorry, I messed up there.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, do we want to scroll up and see the bottom? Yeah. And so, this is the bottom of the first page. Essentially, it's 18 sheets, and they're on an 8.5 by 11. And so I actually just printed them out. And I would love to try to figure out, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do field visit wise, but to like get some of these printed out. It's definitely more like a booklet than a pamphlet, but I think it's lovely. So you can take it and print it out. So the bottom half, I think some people took this the wrong way, and I did initially, because Eve's artwork is also very subtle and a little tongue-in-cheek. So you often hear me say, like, ranting against that it's just a tool, right? With things like blockchain. And I'm like, it's not just a tool. It can't be used for good things. And so this framing of like, oh, it's not a rant against technology. It can be just a tool. I really believe that was a tongue-in-cheek statement, because she has to asterisk. And then at the bottom, it says that this technology was made by military intelligence and dark magicians. So I think when you have this little sidebar, you realize like that's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek poke at the people who are always talking about it's just a tool, don't worry about it. You can use it for good and evil. At least that's the way I understood it from Eve. And then next to them, it says, however, our addiction to technology and convenience is being used against us. And so she has a series of 4 people with cell towers and sort of like, and holding devices with Wi-Fi and these like little fish hooks, sort of like with these ropes around their neck. So I might quibble a little bit, because I feel like our addiction to technology, it really is being that the world is being built around us with the technology, and then we're just supposed to sort of gradually, acquiesce to all of it. And so much marketing is poured into making us feel comfortable with it. But I do think increasingly, there are people who would like to make other choices about personal technologies or to not have it. But that's going to be more and more difficult. And not just phones, the idea that you can get rid of your phone. Eventually, once they move to these systems of, programmable money for public benefits, like you're going to have some sort of tracking system, whether that's, a smart watch or a monitor, or eventually an implantable control system, which they have already developed. So, I think we need to think about that really broadly. And what I like about what Eve has done is that this piece, even though it does frame things within, I guess, like a more general understanding of a lot of the resistance movement, it really does center the impact of these systems, particularly on vulnerable populations like children, veterans, low-income people, housing insecure people. And that is something that, like, I just don't think really exists out there now. Those, besides the Nephili brochure that we did, there aren't print materials that are really centering the social impact finance space, which I'm just so grateful to have that. I don't know, Jason, you have any thoughts, or I'll let you chime in if you feel like.
Yeah, I agree. I was actually, I was focused on, I'm doing a new setup here. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
So check it out. This is our new layout. Like they might get a little bit better shot here. So, but yeah, go ahead. I'll chime in though. I will chime in.
This is the page. Essentially it's hitting on like this person who's surrounded by boxes and data. And I really like a consistent theme through this, are all these ones and zeros. So it's a very binary world, and it actually fits really nicely with the black and white artwork that she shows, which is good because black and white artwork will be more easily reproducible, like on low end Xerox, that sort of thing. It's really nice and crisp. But it's a worker. It looks like a warehouse worker who's surrounded by these various boxes, and on the boxes are logos of all of these companies, including Watson and IBM, which we know goes way back to the 1920s in terms of the Hollerith cards and managing everyone. But and then it goes through to name brands like Apple and Amazon and Netflix, but into also DARPA and IARPA. So centering the fact for people who may not think about this right off the top of their head is that our consumer technology is fundamentally military technology, right? That the boxes that show up on the porch they come directly out of the military industrial complex. And so even though that they seem pretty domesticated and harmless, they do have these sort of darker origins. And yeah, so it says, oh, sorry, I didn't get to that. Can we scroll back? It says it's time to take a closer look at the new world being built around us. So that's the one. And then it says, while the rest of us are kept busy working, being entertained and fighting amongst ourselves, and then it goes on, the elites have their plans underway. And I do think that, I've often spoken about the world sensorium and social physics and the way the polarities are being used to advance the narrative to get us to the next level. That the fighting each other and being entertained and being consumers, that's something that we need to be aware of and be more mindful about, and be more intentional about how we're being managed, because we are being managed on every side. Like when you're in a digital space, there's no way you're not being managed. The only question is to be aware of the extent to which you're being managed and being able to identify those ways in which you're being managed.
Yeah, and as far as like the social media goes, I don't think people just realize just how deeply they're being managed. Mark Zuckerberg was just on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I didn't watch the thing, but they had a little clip of it online on YouTube that I watched, but it was the whole conversation was just framed around the narrative that, it's these political operatives that have fake dummy accounts that are promoting their political candidate, and that's the biggest problem. And I don't if anybody watched the show and can tell me if they mentioned anything other than that, I probably will go check some of it out. But what I've realized is that through selective, corralling different groups of people into different silos, and then picking and choosing what people see and when and how, like, that's like next level shit. Anyway, so again, like, you're immersed in this. It's kind of like the fish in water. You're immersed in this media, but I don't think it's come out really the extent to which we are being manipulated. And I think it's way beyond what anybody is talking about.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and you've even had that on our channel, like administering my channel, like where you're not allowed to comment on things, or things have disappeared, or like you've seen it firsthand how things are manipulated, because you can kind of try on different identities in the space and see how the lens through which you're allowed to see it differs.
Right. And the scary thing is, like, this is, still kind of the early stages of this. They're just going to get better and better at it, and it's going to become more seamless. I
know. Yeah. All right. So this is the bottom of page 2. It says the wealthy elitist class have been busy mapping out our future, which they plan to control. By 2030, you will have no privacy, own nothing, and be happy. And it talks about the World Economic Forum and various secrets and not so secret societies that we won't get into here. And so, and then it as the slave owners of the past saw themselves as benevolent masters, the billionaires of today also assume they know what's best for the rest of us. And they have sort of this tall top hat figure with people on a string like a puppet, like an obey. And so, I would say, my position has sort of moved a bit beyond the World Economic Forum as the main focus, but she does talk about the not so secret things, right? Like a lot of this stuff is right out in the open. And I think some of this is a bit of a shorthand. When people see that, they feel like a comfort, like the most of the resistance community, because they're like, oh, okay, she's talking a language I can understand. I can identify with that and then like move further into the story. So I think that's really helpful. But again, that it's not so secret, and that it connects to the slavery, and that it connects to slavery with benevolent, so-called benevolent masters. And one of the things we touched on a little bit talking last night was, we're working on a presentation for this radio ecology and energy economic stuff with Leo, and looking at, you had mentioned, shouldn't we put a slide of the Zhong Massacre in there? Because this is about parametric insurance. And like the Zhong Massacre was an incident where slave holders were insuring their cargo, which was human cargo of enslaved African people. And the terms of the insurance claim, like they would get a pay if they died like of drowning, but not if they died of starvation or disease. And so they ended up throwing people overboard and killing them so that they could get their insurance payout. And so these were people that, the systems are out in the open. These same insurance systems, these same commodity trading systems are still here. And that's what we're going to get into a bit later. It's a different kind of commodity. It's a data commodity instead of a material, physical body commodity. But it is the same, very same legacy. And in order for us to accept it, or at least like the middle and professional classes to accept it, it has to be framed as something that is civilized and caring. And so, I think I appreciate that perspective.
It was funny too, our conversation last night, because I was like, they were treated like they didn't have value, and then you were like, no, they do have value. But we were talking about two different values. I was talking about the inherent value of life, and then you were like, oh, from that vantage point, or from that perspective, that they had value in terms of the insurance claim. But it was just kind of a funny, like, this, what is value? What's valuable? And it was because I had to stop and think about that. I was like, wait, what? Oh yeah, of course. Value in terms of money. That's not what I was talking about.
Yeah, which hat are you wearing? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
The bad guy hat.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And so this is page 3. The top says goal 16.9 of the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals is a legal identification for all. And then it talks about the 17 goals, which is great, because I still think that while there's discussion of ESG impact investing, there's still a lot of folks in the resistance that are not taking this back to the United Nations. They're not taking it back to these 17 goals and knowing exactly what they are and how the metrics work, and understanding that, the World Economic Forum has been consolidated with the UN. And then that's really almost an extension of this impact management project and this global capital. So, I think there's still a certain subset of people who want to lean into like, it's the Chinese or the socialists or something. And I'm like, no, like if you actually look at the 2,000 of the world's largest asset holders, they've structured these systems for that, but everything has to be within a pipeline and traceable. And that includes not only human beings, but social systems, natural systems. Everything has to have its unique identifier, because within the augmented reality space, you have to be trackable every single moment, or the whole augmented reality smart contract layer falls apart. So that's something that I really think that, people need to get better at, is unpacking that. And then what complicates it is that, you have certain figures like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. who've made their identity and built their identity around sustainability and like alternative energy. And, that's something that's been a red flag for me for a long time, is you can't both, on the one hand, do your health advocacy a certain way, but then pretend that the zero carbon sustainability stuff is fine. Like a decision has to be made, and he either has to walk that back and explain how he now knows that fits into the overall scheme, or people are going to have to live with increased level of cognitive dissonance as this rolls out, because clearly the UN, the climate narrative, but not just climate, because most of those goals are managing the poor within the environment. Man and the environment are going to be central. So, and then there's a little inset here. It says peace, justice, and strong institutions, which is quite lovely for me, because I've been focusing a lot lately on this, on the Quakers, on The Hague, on this international arbitration, and the understanding of quote unquote peace as like homeostasis, like a steady state economy. This is something that's feeding into the work we're doing around the ecological economics. Peace meaning a circuit, like the circular economy, the stakeholder economy, but the energetics, the electrical engineering of it. And peace is going to be a very, very charged word, like moving forward. And so part of it is how they lay claim to the terms and what it means. Just like we had some confusion over which part of value, which kind of value we're talking about, like which kind of peace are we talking about? Is it a piece that's engineered through, a complementary nanotechnology lobotomy, which is kind of the image next to it, which is a silhouette of a person that's filled with hexagons. So that's sort of the graphene hive mind and ones and zeros. And it talks about like when you get this identity, it's going to be digital and it's likely going to be on blockchain, and emphasizing the interoperability of that along with the QR codes, which have become, so much more normalized over the last couple of years.
Yeah, on the UN thing, the UN SDGs, even like the Agenda 21, I had people talking to me about that a long, long time ago, and I kind of I didn't really go there, and I kind of didn't invest the time and energy to really study it because of the way it was being framed. And it was framed in your typical the UN's coming for America, and I knew that wasn't the situation. Like, I mean, now that I've studied it more, it's like the UN is, because I always thought that there was too much emphasis put on the UN. Like, the UN are going to have all these stories. The UN are going to have troops in our cities and all this other stuff, and I just I knew that there was a false thing about that narrative. Although it's interesting because it's unfortunate because it prevented me from actually looking at the SDGs and what their goals are. But because of the way it was framed in this partisan kind of patriotic, inaccurate way, it's just looking at this or just thinking about that. Like I should have been on the SDG thing a long time ago, but it was the way that it was framed. And I think that's deliberate. Like they're gonna oh, it's the communists coming or whatever. Like they do these polarizing narratives that aren't actually accurate. So I don't know, just something that I was thinking about, like looking at
I would just say too, like I feel like people finally are sort of catching up on the impact finance space, but the frame is not the frame that I've offered. The frame is looking at global capital flows that get the impact data to train the AI, right? So it's profit and it's also the machine learning. The vast majority of people who are the main talking heads out there are talking about ESG as if it's some outside thing. I mean, like right before I got off Twitter, I was really upset because someone had sort of advanced this tweet that said, "Oh my gosh, like BlackRock can't even protect itself from the SEC's SEG, regulations. Like, how will the rest of us protect ourselves if BlackRock can't even protect themselves?" And I'm thinking, oh,
as if they're in opposition.
And I was like, no, BlackRock built it. Like,
Right.
if anything, the BlackRock leaning on the government to get it in because the BlackRock needs these policy, like the infrastructure. It is a public-private partnership. But if anything, the government is what's providing access for the private capital to place the bets on people and nature. But it wasn't the government that went to BlackRock and asked for this to be set up. It's simply the next structural layer of how this really, really concentrated capital has to flow. So, for the most part, we're talking about it, but these people are talking about it. They're caught in as far as I'm concerned, there's a story that's incorrect, and it's not actually going to lead to any resolution because now they've got people looking in the wrong place for what the source of the problem is.
Right.
So, yeah. And so then at the bottom, it talks about like your digital ID having, biometrics. And, that's, when I started in these, my work was looking at initially children in South Africa on surveillance play tables tied to UN SDG 3, right? And so you were saying your introduction, and that's why it differs how you come into an issue. If you come into an issue and the person presenting it is presenting it with a frame that is not necessarily aligned with yours, you set it aside. Like for me, once I looked at it and I realized that what was happening was unethical, that you don't put children on technology to mine their behaviors and give them a credit score. I was able to walk in that door much more clearly, because if I knew if they were doing this to children, they would do it across all these other areas, including, healthcare and housing and the judicial system. But one of the main groups in this was the Syrian refugee population, because I think, not unlike the people who fled Ukraine, that was done on purpose. Like, that was part of the plan. The displaced people scenario was a very much intentional, calculated element of trialing these technologies. And so in those cases, not only were the children put on technology in refugee camps, but the parents had their retinal scans taken, their iris scans, and to pay for groceries. And a lot of these, it was connected to countries in Scandinavia. So like the Ericsson, Nokia, progressive, socially progressive countries that would literally ask Syrian moms to scan their retina to get groceries for their families. And these are people who literally had their, whole communities bombed to nothing. It wasn't like they were trying to sneak in and take advantage. They were literally in the most vulnerable situation ever. So that biometric is key. And I like the way that Eve has laid out all of the different elements, because that's something that really struck me, is when it's not just your eyes or your thumbprints. It's your DNA, it's your vein patterns, finger geometry, like even gait recognition. Because I think some people are like, oh, well, they're doing this, they're obscuring faces so that they can get other biometrics, which may be the case. And if anything, I think it would be like the gait recognition aspects. And even one thing that's not on there, which always hit me really strongly, is behavioral biometrics. So like, they know if, on average, when you wake up in the morning and check your email. Like, they know when you're in a car and if the car is in a place that you're usually in. And so any of those, like some constellation of abnormalities, would trigger a like, oh, well, this isn't behaviorally, this doesn't correspond with the person as we know them. Like, it's a different pattern. So then on the bottom, it's just talking about the fact that you use these digital identities tied to individual communication devices to access concerts, to access grocery stores, to access other things, that if you don't have this track and trace biometric identity, your options for mobility are going to be significantly decreased.
Okay, you were chopping up a little bit, so I lowered your quality that's going to you. So just let me know if you have issues reading it. Okay.
Okay, and so this is page 4, the top. It's great. It says in other places they're introducing digital driver's licenses with biometric data. So this is huge, and it actually has Florida, which is great, because we know when the polarity, they're driving people into Texas and Florida, but the conservatives have their different way of getting everyone on blockchain, which is the e-government. And so that's that. And then on the other side, it talks about pilot programs, many of which are the ones that I featured, which is really great, because this is something, again, that even 2 years later, as much as I've pounded on it, like, it's not happening. And even people who used to kind of talk about it, I feel like they've pulled back, which is really disappointing. So looking at the Syrian refugees, looking at the pilot for health records in Austin on the unhoused people. And that was just giving people, literally taking their biometrics and giving them a laminated card with a QR code on it. Like, it doesn't even have to be high tech. That was what I was trying to talk about. And then tracking pregnancy behaviors in Tanzania and this baby, and then also Cardano, that the data that's going on there is all kinds of data, from healthcare data to education data, that's going to build out your digital twin. Okay, and then underneath it says, eventually all your records will be stored in your digital wallet. And this is sold to us as being private and secure, unhackable, decentralized, data. And it sort of looks like this, big lens looking in. And one of the things I like about this is that there are these little blocks that show all the different things. And one of the things I'm trying to sort of write about right now is, again, my frustration with the story not being in the right space. I keep thinking, like, why are we having all the wrong conversations around blockchain? Like that the conversations are about oh, it's crypto and it's a Ponzi scheme, or oh, it's crypto and it's energy intensive, or oh, like it's fraudulent. But we're not really talking about Web3, and we're not talking about the interoperability that's needed for augmented reality and these social impact finance deals.
And all
Because
those other
that
things are true, by the way. I mean, it's not that they're not true. It's just that it's not getting at the real essence of what's, you know what I mean?
Well, what I'm saying is those are the problems that are being used to enact the solution that is planned, right? Like the fraudulent crypto is being used to enact accountable crypto, right? The energy intensive crypto is going to be used to enact green crypto, like as they call it, right? The hackable, all of the hacks of data in the ed tech space. I knew 4 years ago that all of these hacks were on purpose to create the justification to put it on blockchain, to have a mastery transcript on blockchain. So they know, and they don't care about hurting people. They don't care about bankrupting people. They don't care about people losing access or, having their identity stolen. They don't really care. These people, they don't care about mining the sides of mountains to get what they want. In the meantime, yes, true, but this is a sacrifice zone. This is all because the stakes are essentially an entirely new empire. And if we don't frame the conversation in the right way, like if we don't frame the conversation, this is a new empire. This is about a mechanical control grid that's not just of humanity, that's on every bit of life on this planet, that's creating a digital parody. And sure, they're going to use these things to trick you into asking for it and to trick you into liking it and wanting it. And I have somebody I know who was invited to a conference with many people who are supposedly, critics of the crypto space, and it was about education. They wanted to frame it about crypto and education, not blockchain. They kept trying to link it to some like crypto finance, and that's not what it is. It's about augmented reality and skills badges and speculation. And these are people, again, who in these social media spaces, the algorithms, who's ever's deciding, have uplifted as the experts, right? And they've got it wrong. Like they've totally got it wrong, in my opinion, because if you don't get the framing right, you're going to waste all your energy and then you're going to beg for it. Then, of course, like when they show up at the door with the answer, you're not going to be able to say, well, no, thank you. Like, that's not what I meant. You're not going to say that. You're just going to go along with it because they know.
And you're just going to be so grateful. You're going to be so grateful. Like that's what they do. They get you where you're just like, even if you do have questions about it, you're just like, well, it's better than nothing. And we've talked about this progressivism, incrementalism, like, oh, you know what?
Yeah.
It's at least moving the ball forward. Well, actually, maybe it's not moving the ball forward. Maybe that was where it was intended to go in the first place.
I mean, I would be interested. Like, I mean, if there are people who really think my take is wrong, that like we shouldn't be centering the spatial web and the sensor networks and the digital identity and the way in which our behavior is going to be a commodity that's betting on both sides through like AI algorithmic trading, like that's the story I'm not hearing. Why am I not hearing that story yet, Jason? Like, I mean, there's a very small group of people who are telling that story. I'm very grateful for the really detailed work that Leo has been doing in that arena, because he has the insight to really unravel it and make it understandable, and is really adding new material to the conversation. But at this stage of the game, it should be a lot more people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So this is the next one, the 5th page. So, but let's not kid ourselves. If the government or another corporation is offering you a digital ID, you'd better believe they have their backdoor access. And so it's in a bar and people are sitting there and they're like, well, the bar owner can't see your information, but the government can. These third parties or hackers. And I would say that there is a lot of hacking that even happens on blockchain, either on the side chains or in the wallets. It's not nearly as secure as people want to know. And I would say, folks should look into the secret network. It's a silly name. Like, I mean, how ridiculous they call it the secret network. It came out of Enigma Protocol. Enigma Protocol was MIT Media Lab. And now it's with Intel. So Intel and MIT have the secret network. Now, it may not be personal to you, but it would be like anonymized, so that if you walk up to a door that you're trying to open and you need a token, like it would know that token. But it would also use, I think, the plan is to use these soul-bound tokens to tag as like metadata tags when people receive services for these social impact finance markets. So they can run their calculations for impact and seek their patterns and justify the narratives that they're spinning out about fixing the world or solving poverty or solving climate change or what have you, and still tell people that it's private. So they like want to have their cake and eat it too. But for the most part, I haven't found many people in this space who understand about the secret network and how it relates to the impact finance piece.
Yeah. Also, real quick,
then,
someone had asked who is Leo. Leo Saraceno. We started this. Actually, I should hide our things, but let me just hide our windows here. This is our discourse forum that we created. Let's see where. Boom. Discourse.wrenchinthegears.org. We created a working group for him. So Leo's been working with us. He's been posting some really great stuff on here, and also he's written some articles on Silicon Icarus. I'm not going to be able to get to the bottom of the page because this is just going to go forever.
We have too much stuff now.
Anyways.
Yeah, Silicon Icarus, he's a contributor there, and he has done a lot of good work on Celo or Celo, C-E-L-O, and the way these different coins and bonding curves and alpha bonds work. So,
so anyways, he's just a collaborator with this that comes from having been involved in that space and initially kind of supportive of it, and then came to the realization that there were problems. So, but he's been doing some great work.
Yeah.
Are we on this one still?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay. So then it's talking about like the cashless money and the tracking devices, both in stores for food and border crossings and other things. And so I would say this is something that oftentimes when it's discussed in like the general resistance spaces, it's framed as like carbon trading or these carbon economies, or the frame is really around sort of middle America. And I'm not saying that they're not also going to come around middle America, but I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we didn't actually look to the precedents for digital like programmable money, which again are the refugee spaces and the quote unquote humanitarian aid. But also I've done quite a bit of research into the conditional cash transfer pilots in Mexico. And those were done pre-programmable money, but where the payments that you received as a poor mother were contingent on performing certain behaviors, both yourself and your child, and having that logged in an ongoing record. And, I have a friend who's local who is like she's on long-term disability. And so some insights into the use of devices and programmable money, like it's been very helpful to understand the way in which people who have to navigate these bureaucracies that are connected to money and public benefit systems, that this isn't like brand new, that this has a history and a long legacy, and that, they initially pilot on people who find it because of their economic circumstances, health circumstances, dislocation circumstances, hard to push back and hard to advocate for themselves. And so those are the people who are targeted first up and have been for a while.
And someone mentioned that they only see a green screen, which is weird because we're not using a green screen. But if anybody else has any issues viewing it, let us know. But that's probably just a problem on their end. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So then on the bottom of page 5, it says that the smart world is being touted as sustainable, but in truth, the products are made using minerals mined by child labor using toxic chemicals. And then there's a lot of lists. So so the mining is really central. I would say the thing that I'm realizing more in the research that I've been doing around the Berggruen Institute is that like definitely there's high energy costs and high mining costs in the foreseeable future in these spaces. But the people who are planning this anticipate that it's going to be the next level of mining. Like this stuff is going to be in nanotechnology and optics and photonics. And a lot of it is going to rest on molecular engineering at the atomic scale, like at the tiniest bit. And so what I think is actually happening in the climate justice space, quote unquote, is that there's a lot of prospecting being done right now, like bioprospecting, for new biomaterials. Like they're coming up with all sorts of new ways of doing computation, doing energy storage that are often framed as like biomaterials. Literally, they're gonna create stuff in reactors. They're gonna do stuff with genetically modified materials. They're gonna like mix people and machines and like they literally think that they are God and they can just move the molecules around and make things. And they're gonna call it, they're gonna act like it's magic, and they're gonna call it sustainable because it's biological, right? It's not that nasty petrochemical stuff. It's biological material. And I'm asking for people to have a much more robust ethical conversation about that. Like in the past, I used to say, like, I stand with the yeast. Like I know people who are programming yeast to do things that yeast were never meant to do. And, we have to kind of come to grips with, I know we've been doing hybridization for a long time, but what is our ethical responsibility when we start to make over living systems in fundamental ways? And like, what are the guardrails to say, well, you don't do that to people, right? And then at what point is like it between the yeast and the people? Where's the line that you draw to say, okay, well, you don't do it to dogs, but maybe can you do it to bees? I mean, there's a whole conversation that's not happening. And so I think that the child labor and the toxic chemicals are very true for now. But I think that though that conversation is going to be leveraged next into having us accept bioengineering as somehow a greener version of this. And I'm not actually buying it. So I'm looking ahead with my foresight instinct saying, like, some of the stuff around the mining and the child labor, because the child labor will probably also be used to put people on blockchain and track them for quote unquote anti-slavery or human capital development, to say, oh, well, we'll have the child miners half the day and then they'll be doing ed tech coding half the day. And won't that be an improvement? Like, it's all going to be about the data dashboards and this transition. So the energy transition, which I've been looking into, is all going to be about impact and the ESG. So it's a game. All of it's a game, and like, it's not our game, and we're not going to win by playing in it.
Yeah, and how they get you too is they will be the problems that they'll be at least pretending to be addressing, or have some other new thing that they're bringing forward. There are real problems, and that's where they get you, because you're like, oh no, this is actually a very serious issue that needs to be addressed. But if you don't understand that they have a new thing that's also problematic that they're introducing, and knowing who they are, it's just like, okay, these banks and corporations don't give a shit about mining, like you said. They don't care about child labor. Yeah, they didn't just suddenly get a conscience. Right. So if they're promoting it, you can be sure that there's something else. You have to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
I wanted to quickly say.
Oh,
go ahead. I just wanted to quickly say something about this previous slide about the hackers on blockchain, and I listened to a lot of talks on, and I've actually done a lot of editing around in that space, and that's always the framing is like, oh, we got to protect your data, your data from the hackers, and it's like, actually, the people that you need your data protected from are literally the companies who are collecting it. I mean, I'm concerned about hackers. I'm far more concerned about literally the company that's collecting the data in the first place, and that's never talked about.
Because right. the social impact finance deals can't happen without the interoperability, and that's going to be tied to your single assigned QR code and your whole life, right, from prenatal till your gray or grave or what have you. They'll probably put a QR code on your, eco whatever casket to get your energy out of like your compostability. Like, how much did your body compost at the end? Like, these people are monsters, but they'll sell it really good. They'll like have a really nice ad with some lovely music and like a green tree,
Yeah.
Here's your QR code on your casket, your eco casket.
Eco casket. I think we should start a company. No, I'm kidding.
Oh gosh.
All right.
So I didn't get the last one
Oh,
there.
sorry.
It's just
My bad.
the electromagnetic pollution. And so again, yeah, I mean, once you understand what augmented reality is and what the smart contract layer is, like now you totally know why the telecommunications companies, and the FCC didn't give a darn about what the city, that if cities didn't want this. They're like, this is the new empire. This new empire is coming, and we're going to put it in your backyard no matter what. Um, the other piece is like, if you look at dirty electricity, that's like dirty power actually is implicated in diabetes, like a certain kind of diabetes and pre-diabetes. We know that like that is a huge social impact bond space. And then, the plan is that probably they'll put people in smart clothes and put them on health fitness pathways. But you can do all the yoga you want. You can change your diet. But if you're being irradiated like as a water-based life form with these frequencies, it's ultimately not going to be good. And one of the things that I've been working on today a little bit, because it's actually tied next to the nuclear power and these small scale transitions that are going to be sold as green, and these radioisotopes, is this idea of saltational evolution, which is different than gradual, like Darwin's gradualism. It's sort of like bigger leaps through, at certain points in history, living creatures like made evolutionary jumps, and they actually call them hopeful monsters. And if you look at it, there's something called hormesis, where they're using radiation to try to trigger. And this is something, again, Leo's done a lot of work in mutagenesis back to the 20s, right? They're taking these fruit flies and like zapping them with high levels of radiation to trigger mutations. And like, they did it to seeds, right? We're going to zap these plants and see what we get. Like maybe we'll get some hopeful monsters. Well, we're the hopeful monsters now. Like we're the things that are being zapped, and they don't really care about, like, man, they're creating impact markets in chronic illness. Like it's not genocide, guys. It's literally managed chronic illness under wearable technology. That's what it is. Trying for the hopeful monsters. So like maybe you get a few of the hopeful monsters out of it. And that's what those towers are for. It is the radio eugenics program.
Yeah, on that one, I want to kind of just share something really quickly that Leo had posted this. It's actually about a stable coin. It's about creating a coin that's backed by physical assets, natural physical assets. But there's a line in here that really gets to kind of some of the mentality. Is this the one? Let's see. Hold on, let me find it. I think I copied. Okay, here it is.
This is what our discourse looks like.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll just read it. It says, this was from this paper about a stable coin, but the mentality is interesting. The theory behind e-stablecoin is built on the fact that free energy can be transferred by the transmission of information alone. It can seem daunting to try to bridge a connection between the pristine beauty, purity, and security of the ethereal digital world and the dirty physical reality that humans must inhabit to physically survive. So this thing is, it's insane. It's insane. The actual natural world that we live in is a dirty physical reality, where the digital world is pristine beauty, purity, and security. I mean, that's actually really incredibly. It's a window. It's a window into like how some of these people
they
think.
want that level of purity. Like they think that
like this is security, purity, beauty right here. But like nature is like messy and dirty and gross, and that's just, we have to live in this gross natural world. It's like, I read that, I'm just like, oh my God, like you said that aloud. Well, not aloud, right? But Leo was like, I'm surprised this got past their editors.
They tip their hand a little bit,
Yeah, you're just like, wait, what? But it's hard because you're like, we don't think like that. Yeah, we don't think like that. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I think that's the wonderful potential, right? The chaos, the that which is outside. Like, I don't think that they can get their head in the space of people who would advocate that the natural is superior to the counterfeit. And so I think that gives us an edge, because they're
Yeah.
just going to always underestimate the real.
But that, even like within the metaverse, you can be whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Like, you're trapped in this physical world, and you're free in the
Well, it's
metaverse.
interesting. One of the things I was looking at, this post I'm making, I was thinking back to my thesis advisor, and she was I'm not sure if she's still alive, but she a landscape historian in the Pennsylvania German in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and I found her dissertation from 1980, which was about this herbal. It was about like just a common herbal book, like of medicinals for just regular people, like farmers. It wasn't a fancy academic book. It was just like a basic, first aid kind of thing, like how you would use plants. And to solve different, medical issues that you might have. And in the thing, it actually talked about using plants for depression, for immigration, like that the new immigrants were so sad from leaving their homeland that like it triggered like a certain level of like dissociation and sadness, and so they were trying to find like a tea or something that would help with that. And I was thinking, as I looked through it, how like the mental health, we had sort of a broader conversation about mental health recently, but like we're sort of having this forced immigration into the metaverse, right? Like it is an empire, it is a place. And we don't really most of us don't have a comfort level there. And we don't know what to expect, and we don't know how to behave, and it doesn't feel right. And it's nothing that we're used to, and it's unknown. And like, I think it is triggering these sort of emotional and health related things, like even this forced immigration into the metaverse. So anyway,
That's
it
an
just jumped
interesting
out.
framing, like the idea of
Like,
like
wow, we're like refugees being
refugees
pushed
from
into
the
a
real world.
yeah.
That's crazy.
At least that's what they aspire to. And I think the tension of us like trying to occupy this midway space, it causes a lot of stress.
Yeah. Well, they'll prescribe you some plants, and all will be well.
Yeah, the microdose, right?
Microdosing a window plant.
Here's your tea with a QR code on it, Okay, so so this really hit me. This is the top of page 6. We've been conditioned to accept and demand even more surveillance in the name of safety. And they have the various devices like Ring doorbells and Nest's home monitoring and TSA, and this Microsoft Azure, which is the cloud computing, right? So a lot of the premise of the data economy is built on the idea that you are unsafe and you have to seek safety in the machine. And then it says, but most of us don't recognize how invasive this technology is. And it has facial recognition with emotion recognition, which is something that really shocked me when I found out about it. And this was about 5 or 6 years ago, early on in the ed tech, that these devices that we use, and this was out of MIT Media Lab, were being used to track our emotions. And of course, in the dual use technology, it was framed as, I think it was Affectiva was the name of the product. And they said, initially we just want to use this to help train kids on the spectrum in social cues, right? Like they always pick the nice use case. We really care about kids with autism and helping them adapt. And then they flip it around like literally within a year or two, and they're selling it to like marketers to do A/B testing on ads. They're selling it to car companies to monitor people while they're driving, like every single thing. And then one of the uses was also using it for ed tech, because they know that people zone out when they're on the online classes. And so they were using it for like essentially proctoring students to see if they were being attentive to their classes, to their online lessons. So, when a lot of people have been protesting surveillance in schools and surveillance cameras, or maybe, like metal detectors or various things, I kept saying, well, every single device has a camera built into it. Like every single device is part of the surveillance system. And then on the bottom, it says behavioral psychologists have been weaponized and deployed in every sector of our lives, including the technology sector. And, it has a big crowd and it's talking about like education, media, law enforcement, government, military, technology. And people are just sort of oblivious. And I guess they're coming out of the university psychology department. Oh, this is great, actually. It says military grants, which is very true. And that's something that I found out at Penn, that our positive psychology department with Martin Seligman, who essentially his work in learned helplessness was implicated in torture protocols at Guantanamo. They're also selling you on authentic happiness and things like grit and metrics. And so many things that are being sold to us as being for our own good actually are coming out of domination culture in very, very deep ways. And then it says not only is our behavior under close scrutiny, but also our future behavior is being determined by algorithms. And so here it has the predictive analytics, where essentially your brain is connected to all of these nodes of thinking because it's mirrored. They're trying to use our brains as like the most magnificent parallel processors to train their neural networks, like how to work more efficiently, because the brain is really like this most beautiful, efficient object. And then in that, they also have, there's a reference of someone walking along under a panopticon eyeball of Palantir. And we have the microscope, which is also like I keep often talking about. Do you want rule by electron microscope? No, that's not electron microscope. But if you're one of the people who are uplifting all the white coats and everything and just saying these are our good white coats and they have it right because they just mismanaged the pandemic, then you're asking to live under the microscope. And that's really the same as living under all of these technological systems.
Yeah, I have found this. I thought I would just grab this video. I found this the other day, and it was just like had some images of like some of the AI and where they're using AI to create artificial humans, like I guess for the metaverse, where it reacts to your facial expressions and whatnot. But like
Oh,
it
wow.
was actually like,
I mean, like it would know like what kind of person would be more responsive to?
well, no, I think it's for just so like you can walk around in the metaverse or whatever, and you could put on a bodysuit or whatever, a virtual bodysuit, but it would react to even your facial expressions. Like they go in this thing and they're like, this video is talking about how they're getting better and better to like. So this guy makes like lots of weird faces. So it's like, oh, we're having problems because we're not being able to capture the whole face here. But then they're like, it's just talking about how they're getting better and better at like, it's just some of the imagery is just kind of creepy, like where it can like model your face, but you obviously you
Right.
don't, you could have your avatar,
But
but
see, the thing is like, I mean, is that what the blockchain is going to be? Like, because my sense is, I don't know, are you only going to have one avatar? Like when you have your single sign on for the internet, does it have to look like you? Because I think the capitalist model is that they want you to be able to be a lot of different kinds of things
right. Well, the
depending on who
machine
you are.
you'll be able to look like however you want to everybody else, but of course the blockchain needs to know that it's you, so you can have all these different identities, but to the core of it, like, yeah, obviously they want to know who you are. In
Well,
fact,
and
actually,
that's
Mark Zuckerberg even said something about that on the little clip that I watched, the Joe Rogan clip, where he was like, "Yeah, that's the thing is like we want to know like who the person is. So if someone has a big audience, he was saying, if someone has a big audience and is running a platform, we want to actually know who that person is that's running it.
right. Which is probably why they were doing those like syncing devices and everything, like more and more invasive. But even so, like in these spaces, like these online worlds, like you don't know if you walk up to someone who they really are, right? Like they could present as a rabbit or a young girl or an old man or whatever, and then how do you even know? And the thing that's really strange to me is imagining, like, we've been steeped in identity politics for the past decade, where everything is about how you look and your appearance, and then what that your physical appearance links to in terms of your cultural identity and all the baggage attached to that. And so what happens when you wander around the metaverse? Like, are there going to be frameworks? Like I mean, I can't remember is it Rachel Dolezal, like the woman who was white who represented herself as being a woman of color? Like, how does that even happen in the metaverse? Like, are you going to have a token that, like, with the blood, like some sort of like blood quantum that if you want to be represent yourself a certain way that you have to demonstrate you're entitled to that thing? Like, it's really confusing, and I feel like, you know, the thinkers, the philosophers, the like, we're not having these conversations yet. And
Well, this part here was talking about how like the AI is they're getting good at, even if your face is obscured. Then it jumps into an ad here. But even if your face is obscured, I think the rest is just an ad. But like, see how it's red? So that's the AI kicking in. So it's
oh
doing
wow.
prediction there. So like they had another one somewhere in this video where it was like the person had a VR headset on and it could still see it knew where the eye, you know, if he had a hat on, it knew where the eyebrows were, and it could make predictions based on all this other data about what was
But then,
actually going
like,
on
if you
there.
think about the prediction, like, what if you're walking up in the metaverse and somebody wants something from you, right? They want you to do something, or they want you to buy something, or get something. Like, they'll have the data stream to know which is the most effective way of influencing you, right? Like, which I think it ties in with some of the stuff that Penn was doing in neuromarketing, like the neurology of selling goods and services. But it might not even be a good anymore. It might be that they're there to convince you to do a behavior, right? And so, you, you know, we've both sort of been stung in social media spaces with people that we like over time, like not just casual people that we feel like we know, and then something flips, and then they're like not that, and then you think, well, is that a digital thing? Like, what was that? Is it disconnected from the real thing? Like, at what point was the real real and the digital digital? Like, it's very murky. And
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, so yeah, I guess we're on to the next page.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, oh, I think this is one of my favorite ones. So, onto the top of chapter 7, it has the health bonds, pandemic bonds, and Goldman Sachs. And one of the things, and you know, I've kind of moved a bit beyond this now. Like, I'm off into like nanophotonic, you know, piezoelectric energy harvest. But it's good to revisit this because these were my first like 3-6 months in the trenches with the lockdowns, and looking and seeing that Goldman Sachs had indices around impact metrics for masks and testing. And there was a really good article, maybe I can include it in a link in the comments, to this pandemic bond program. That this was all built out, like the infrastructure for this was all built out. And then the World Bank has their One Health initiative, which pits people against nature and says, you know, people can't be in nature because nature will make you sick, and also people hurt nature, so everything has to be kept separate. And that adds to the, you know, the planned digital purity simulation that Jason was talking about. But that these making the bets on the behaviors is what is part of the game. And that's the piece that I think still isn't happening. And it's interesting because in our discourse, I think there was a new member that maybe wasn't familiar with my work and was trying to kind of get, it's interesting to see someone getting a handle on the social impact bond space and what the real game is. That the social impact bonds and the behavioral metrics are to have the game, but that's not where the money is. The money is in the betting that happens afterwards, and then the risk scoring and the analytics. And that's something that Leo's work has been really good at, is on like the alpha bonds and the predictions, and what we're going to be talking about too in this like parametric insurance, like the risk profiling. And so then the next thing, it says digital ID is the key to tracking behavior, and they'll track us as we move through the cities, the smart cities. So you have the healthcare, and it looks like there's some piezoelectric energy harvesting thing, or maybe that's a satellite. I'm not sure which one, but smart factories, smart workplaces. Again, the track and trace is all about tracking people in the workplace, smart schools, and smart lights, and smart government. So again, expanding the conversation. This isn't just about a health conversation. This is about the digital empire and the shift to e-government and smart government that was enabled and legitimized through the lockdowns. And then underneath, it's kind of cute. Well, you've got the RoboDog, the Boston Dynamics, the robo humanoid police officer, which is definitely part of the whole defund the police so we can move to automated police. You know, smart glasses, I guess, personalized ads, that's out of like Minority Report, and smart trash cans and smart parking. So this is someone who like literally knew Philly. You know, I've talked about all these, like the armature, both the smart lights and the smart trash cans are sort of used as the base on which you can put other sensor devices and other monitoring devices. Again, often targeting low-income communities with like gunshot spotters and cameras and other things. Oh, smart sewage, right? Because we're later on, there's going to be a smart toilet. So the smart sewage and the smart grid are part of it. And that smart grid is blockchain, right? So all of the blockchain stuff. And, you know, eventually, again, we're going to get back to like, well, we need green blockchain because this current blockchain is a really bad kind of blockchain. We need nuclear blockchain, right? Because that's going to be the answer is getting the like using our like small scale nuclear power, you know, thorium reactors to power our smart grid.
Yeah, in the future, people will be afraid to use their toilet because it's gonna rat on them.
Well, there's a really good short story that I often used to put out on social media, like intermittently, called "On the Domestic Front," I think, and it was from the Oxford, Mississippi Journal, The Domestic Front, and Van Diamondfinger. Yeah, and it's really good because at the beginning, it's about a guy who's really, really depressed and sort of how he in a smart environment because his significant other has been abducted by a smart car, and he's an alcoholic, and essentially he won't use the toilet. He just uses the sink because it doesn't have the same sensors on it.
Wow. Ew.
I know. He also would program his toast to have burn patterns of dictators, I think defecating on his face or something. Like he would pay extra to have like non-open source dictators like that. That's how dark this is. But this short story was at least 5 or 6 years old already. So, you know, the people who knew what was coming, like they were already, you know, writing the stories about it. So we have the Internet of Everything. And again, this is the smart contract layer. This is the thing we have to talk about. Stop talking about all the individual parts and zoom up to the structure. Then you can talk about the small parts. I'm not saying don't talk about the money, the program money, and the smart appliances and these other things under it, but understand that it's all this layer, the augmented reality layer, that is going to require you to be permanently trackable at all times. And then there's a little diagram. The smart things in your home, your bedroom, your kitchen, your toilet, and I would even say like one of the things that I was stumbled across early on, like they have smart, sex toys. They even have these things called like teledildonics. And so one of the things that I was so upset about is like knowing that, while some people might enjoy our like nerdy conversations about like these emerging technologies, there's a lot of other people who are watching all sorts of other content online that is of a more licentious nature, shall we say. And like they have whole industries around this, like soft porn and camming. And so eventually, like that's one of the things I talked about when we went out to Rockfin, is like when you have these platforms, it's not all like cerebral discussions. Some of it's other stuff. And like, how are you like even regulating like children in that space? And this idea of like, teledildonics, like somebody having sex with 200 people on a pay for access subscription program through your thing. Like these are really deep ethical discussions that like, is this progress? Are we really going to call that progress? It doesn't feel like progress. So.
Yeah. And my thing is whatever kink someone's into, like personally, that's, like none of my business. But like, yeah, this is about surveillance. And I'm always talking about like reminding people what SMART is. SMART's an acronym, and it means a self-monitoring and reporting technology. And I think that needs to be.
I'm just even talking about like the messiness, right? Like there's the pure, pristine, controllable version, and then there's the mess, like what they imagine is messy and bleh that we have. And I think even in terms of like central to the marginalization of natural life is the marginalization of like intimacy into something that is managed for the data. because all of this stuff is also training the AI. And just as they want to know like how you drink your cup of coffee, they want to know all of the other stuff too. And I think we have to understand, and they want it at scale, and they want the pattern recognition. So there is both a business imperative and a data imperative to manage us within our smart housing. And this is also going to tie in with wraparound service housing for vulnerable people. And it's not going to be that you're having a bedroom and a living room and a bathroom. It literally will probably be just one smart unit. You will have a pod that will have all of these things crammed in, like the casitas in Austin, right? 60 Internet of Things sensors in one little tiny modular tiny house. And we need for people that we respect in the housing space to start to have these conversations about, is this what we're talking about? Like, are we going to have church groups or private prison groups or whatever running smart housing pods, or adapting refugee housing for unhoused populations that are all dispossessed because of automation? And this is how we're going to have people pay for it? And are we going to have them on, exercise bikes in their tiny pod, getting piezoelectric energy for the free energy grid with the stable coins that Leo's talking about? Like, these are the things they've planned this. So we need to have these conversations now, like yesterday. And I've been very disappointed. I will just say disappointed. And I get it's complicated. Maybe you don't want to have the conversation. Maybe you want to imagine it's far off, but I'm here to say is not far off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, there's the smart toilet. And if you want to know if it really exists, look it up. Stanford just doesn't make crap they're not going to use. And if you Google smart toilet on my blog, I did write a whole thing about the Stanford smart toilets and I think the International Toilet Council. And so I think initially a lot of this, I can imagine linking social impact finance deals to chronic illness that are related to like waterborne disease, and then them installing like maybe trailers full of smart toilets in India or Africa, and then having the payment being the cost offset and some sort of dashboard reduction in chronic illness related to waterborne diseases. But it's not going to stay there, right? Like, one of the talks that I was listening to, there was a gentleman saying about the automation that it was really coming really quickly, that one of the careers that would actually have some time would be plumbers, because they hadn't done all the plumbing yet. So I think once plumbers, like, heads up, it's like you electricians, you're building the open air prison. When they come and ask you to build the open air prison, like, think twice about it, what you're leaving your kids and grandkids. And there are biometric anus programs. So and I've talked about this a lot, about the smart toilet being linked to your smart door, that if the AI decides that whatever the profile is of your morning deposit is not acceptable, that you can't get out. So that's something that I often reference in the, but again, this makes it very clear to people, I think, what the stakes are. And you might think it's ridiculous until you actually Google it, and then you realize that it already exists.
I just like that they named the toilet Toto.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see that. And then,
okay, are we going to the next one?
Yeah. When I pause, you can roll it up.
And I keep jumping in and out because I'm having to like deal with my cough and my.
I know, poor Jason. We postponed it a day because he got hit by a thing.
Yeah, I sounded rough yesterday. I'm like, I got kind of a cold here. I don't know if I'm up for it, but I'm like, do want to have this conversation. But anyways, that's why if I
like the Johnny Cash kind of,
I keep disappearing. If I just had some smart technology to help me out here, I'd be all right. But,
right. So the Internet of Bodies, if you allow it. And I would say the one thing is, if you allow it, is a lot of this stuff, like some of it, there's leading edge, like voluntary, like people with the ear pods or people with the smartwatches or whatever. But I think increasingly this is going to be linked to nanotechnology, and it may even be self-assembling nanoparticles that are atmospheric, that are part of the food we eat, that are part of the air we breathe, that are part of the water that we bathe in. They do have these self-assembling nano structures. And then increasingly these new systems are very simple, and they're moving towards optic and photonic computing. So, I'm not trying to freak people out, but this idea that somehow you're going to just decide not to have any of this happen to you, what I'm saying is it's going to be immersed. And this is why I sort of lean more into the terrain theory, is that we actually have to protect the entire environment, because we may not know what tips the scale in terms of the control system. Some of them, yes, like the Fitbits and the pods and that sort of thing, but maybe not all of it. And I will say, the vagus nerve simulator, the vagus nerve is something that they're very interested in. I see the muscle stimulator. If you haven't read and you like science fiction, the Diamond Age is really, Neil Stephenson's Diamond Age is an interesting read. And at the beginning, it actually talks about there's a guy who ends up being sort of a thug, and it talks about his muscle building protocol, and that he actually has these like little nanobots that like twitch his muscles to like build out his muscles. Like he doesn't actually have to exercise. It's just like the nanobots like twitch his muscles around to bulk him up.
Actually, they've had those things for a long time, because I remember I used to know a guy in my early 20s that had a electric thing. You would put it on your arm and you put it on your legs, and it would just send charges of volts of electricity. It was more primitive like than nanotech, but whatever. But that's been around for a while. People actually have that where you can just sit there and build up your muscles without, it makes you sore too, actually. it's like you're getting a workout. But anyway.
Wow. Well, and then the microbes the microbiome is really important, and the level of signaling. And this is also part of the waves and the frequency and the water. So, when I found out that DuPont was doing research into microbiomes, like, you don't want the people who like were the first people to develop gunpowder and rifles, and then helped build the Oak Ridge National Lab, like uranium processing center. You don't want them messing in your microbiome, because like your gut is your second brain, and that's sort of where your intuition lives. So once they start engineering that stuff, it's a little creepy. And I'll just say, a while ago, I did a site visit to the Pennovation Lab, which is just beyond the University of Pennsylvania campus, the regular campus. It was a former DuPont laboratory site. And it was where they did Teflon testing. And like, they knew how bad all of that stuff was. They knew it. And then they put it in everything anyway. And so when DuPont cleared out, Penn bought it. And now it's a center for swarm drones and military and biotech. But it's very interesting to me that the first tenant of that space, their anchor tenant, is Hershey. So, to me, like, Milton Hershey of Hershey's Chocolate, when he died, his endowment went to this Hershey school. I think he didn't have any children, but it has like a $14 billion endowment. It's very secretive. So to me, I do wonder about, how they manage your microbiome through the food and through things that they know you like chocolate. And it kind of gives a whole new angle on the whole Willy Wonka thing. Oh, and I will just say before we move next, just if it's not a linked here, but if people are listening to this and they haven't actually looked up Ian Akildiz at Georgia Tech, I think it's Ian Akyildiz. He's a professor of telecommunications at Georgia Tech, and the Internet of Bio Nano Things. Those are really important papers. And again, if you question if it's actually real, they think it's real. They publish on it, and they go around to lots of conferences. So, they've been working on this for a while. Okay. And, okay. So we're at the top of 9. Oh my gosh, we're only halfway through. I thought this would be I would go a little faster. So the push to move from the natural world to the synthetic world. And on the one side, they have a person like with their head in a cup, and they've got a natural palm tree behind them. And then on the other side, they have soul transfer with their eyes all spun out, and this like fake tree behind them with like nodes. And, this is interesting because, again, we've done some conversations around soul-bound tokens. And I think that those soul-bound tokens are going to be used. Those are non-transferable tokens as metadata tags. And it talks about transhumanism, or, I say sort of human plus, like altering DNA, connecting your brain to the internet. These are these Melanie Swan's quantum brain, quantum BCI, brain computer interfaces, and augmenting our bodies, which goes into the bottom section there, which is the Japan Moonshot Project. And, that's something that I think merits a lot more time. Jason, if you want to scroll it up, everybody should be looking at this Japan Moonshot project, and definitely, Ryan's site visit there with his toddler, and to see the sustainable development goals, right? To understand that human robot interface, quantum computing, AI, that this is all going to be framed as sustainable, and it's all part of this rainbow colored photonic system that they want us to get outside of our mind and body and time and space by 2050, which is not a long time. I mean, I probably won't be around at that point, but like my kid will be, hopefully, and grandkids out there. So these future generations, these systems are being decided by, and it's not just the government of Japan, because like our Department of Energy is involved with it, our National Science Foundation, the Carnegie Center for Peace. And again, I just want to reiterate, peace being the homeostasis is part of it. So that's key. And just this idea of like tracking every thought, like the World Economic Forum has a video with that. Like, well, how do we protect people to have privacy of your thoughts? Because essentially they're imagining that we won't have any privacy among our own interior world, which to me just feels like it's setting up mass dissociation and depression and anxiety, to feel like we can't even have any privacy in and of ourselves. You want to move on to the next? So you've got like it says the wizards, the finance wizards have been spinning the data. Oh, it's like a spinning wheel. Okay. What are the straw to gold, right? Data to gold. And you've got all the little people dancing underneath. So it's the data economy that's the gold, but also the betting. And here's where she gets into the impact bond. So it's generating wealth from actual problems. And I think this is one of the things that's hard for me in the narrative construction, is that people aren't framing this around like pre-existing conditions. Like these things, I mean, at this stage, they're pilots and they're not necessarily scaled, but it's not that these problems don't exist, that housing insecurity doesn't exist, that addiction, hunger, mental health problems, dyslexia, diabetes, that these are actual real terrible problems. And so it's very frustrating when maybe middle-class, professional class people or conservative people want to just push the whole thing off as if it doesn't matter. We actually do have to figure out a way of redistributing resources to solve these problems, because our society will continue to be wounded in a really terrible way if we don't start to turn this around for everyone. And more with automation, we're all going to be, more and more of us are going to be pulled into these nets of these different problems, and people that we love and people that we care about.
Well, and I would also too just frame that even a little bit differently than, the framing of redistributing resources. It's a little bit off too, because when we're talking about money as a natural resource, that's also problematic, because
I'm not necessarily saying money. I'm saying access to like the things people need.
For sure.
But yeah, I see your point. Yeah, I meant more like it's locked up in this fiction, right? And I truly believe, like, I'm not a Malthusian and I'm not a nihilist. Like, I think that there are ways of being in the world with nature that we could become better relatives. We could have more reciprocity, but there's a lot of reckoning we have to do with ourselves before we get there. But before we can even start to do that reckoning, we have to even understand what the problem is in the first place. And, I think the fact that this zine exists makes me hopeful that maybe it's not a numbers game. It's just getting the right people. And for me, like, Eve was one of those right people who could take this really vast amount of material and condense it into something that I think is much more accessible, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah. Okay. I have to step away for just a minute, but just carry on.
Can you go to the bottom? Okay. And so the bottom of page 10, it says private investors, nonprofit groups, and governments are teaming to make you better while making a profit. And then investors fund nonprofit organizations that run programs to fix target populations. And so I think this is really important too, because a lot of in the resistance space, it tends to be like, or at least a lot of the people that would follow me would be more on the conservative side. People maybe coming from a faith-based perspective, or coming from more of a libertarian perspective, or imagining that this is just the government doing this. And what I've been trying to convey is that the entire system requires both sides. Actually, it requires all three sides. So it requires the money that's coming from portfolios, but increasingly these portfolios may not even be human. Like there's not necessarily even, I mean, there's people whose, names are on the website or on the annual reports, but the actual trades that are being done through machines. So when you get right back down to the decision making, like this is a mechanical process. And so you've got the capital, the government provides access to the people. So the government is providing through your digital identity, through your digital citizenship, the way for them to get to you and to track you through the regulated telecommunication systems and the sensor networks. And then eventually, we know that the governments are going to start to merge into the sort of a global governance system. And that will come through initially like regionalization and then more broadly. And then you've got the nonprofits who are really central. And if you imagine like how many people that work either for some sort of civil society group, some sort of nonprofit, like even the University of Pennsylvania, which is the largest private employer in the city of Philadelphia, is a nonprofit. It doesn't pay any property tax or doesn't have to pay any property tax to the city if it doesn't want to. So you've got all three of these pieces. And then the NGO sector is that third sector, but even globally is also the humanitarian aid and the development aid, which is something that, I've touched on. Roll had that really nice article about the history of Nigeria and setting the African famine from that civil war, setting up the humanitarian development aid space. So some of them can be small, like your local church. Some of them can be large, like USAID. But they're all just a matter of scale, of targeting people with problems that are real problems. But then in the accountability metrics, and this is something one of our forum members talked about today, they identified a situation where in the name of accountability, there will be more data tracking. This was relating to the PPE loan paybacks, right? Or finding cognitive inconsistencies and saying like, see, those people don't want you to have student loan debt forgiven, but look, they had their debt forgiven. And so there are these situations that are set up very strategically to move you into accountability, quote unquote, but that accountability is the digital panopticon. So if you want the help, you're going to have to meet all of the protocols. And that's the smart contract layer. Yeah. And so we've got and how will you get the data? And it has to scale, right? Right now, they don't have it scaled, and it hasn't scaled because they haven't had the digital identity and the smart contract layer and the technology to both power it and integrate it and process it isn't there yet. And I don't know what the time frame is, and I don't know both of the capacity to develop it and the ability or the choice of society to accept it as normal, or a majority of the society to accept it as normal. But they're going to need every intervention to have a data collection advice connected to it. So for veterans, you're not going to get talk therapy with a person. You're probably going to get some sort of gamified virtual reality in a headset. And this is connected to Richard Layard's equation around happiness and depression that was used to scale the National Institutes of Health in England. And they were pushing cognitive behavioral therapy because that's something that's going to be able to be digital. And, they'll just ship the headset out for the veteran in North Dakota because, there's going to be no therapist nearby. Or, increasingly, there might be some Zoom, right? Because it seems like all of the therapists have fallen into don't want to touch people, don't want to see people in person. I'll just do it online, right? And of course, while you're doing this online, some of the most intimate, traumas, that's all being fed into the machine too, right? So eventually this idea of knowing you before you do, or pretending that they know you before you do, and then making those predictions and acting on them, that's sort of the minority report. And then, behind the scenes, you've got the actuaries. So in the social impact world, the accounting firms are major players, the Deloittes, the Price Waterhouses, the Accentures, the people who are doing the predictions. And I'm sure we'll probably touch on that a little bit with Leo in the parametric insurance discussion. So they talk about what do you cost? What is your cost to society? And that, eventually that's going to start to go into intergenerational data, right? Because epigenetic trauma will be part of it. So you might have predictions about your projected burden on society that happened before you're even born. And they've already figured out, and this is especially relevant to ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, the trauma scores developed by Kaiser Permanente, because those are going to set you as a commodity in the game. And the thing that breaks my heart the most is that there's going to be some sweet spot that the actuarial people are looking for. And I created an infographic around this early on, is that they don't want anyone that's so broken that they're not fixable, because that they're not going to put any money into you if they don't think that they can fix you according to a data dashboard, that a way that presents on the data dashboard. These are the ones that are put out by Salesforce and Balmer's, Social Solutions and all these things. They're not going to do it. And if you're just slightly broken and maybe you just need a little bit of an optimization, that's not going to be much. There's not going to be much value in that. They want someone who has had like a medium amount of trauma, who with a minor adjustment, like a minor intervention, is going to look really good on a data dashboard and make this big jump. And I've seen this in the ed tech space. And so they're going to pick and choose. And so your decisions are going to be made based on your data before you're even allowed. Like, it's all prediction. It's all pre-crime. And I think it's going to be really, really harmful. And they're using it to sell these things. But the problems are real. Like, the problems are actually very real. So we have to figure out, like, I need for people who are in these spaces, who are in spaces of like doing the predictive analytics or doing the therapies or doing the education, to understand, like, it's not that hard to understand that, like, BlackRock doesn't care about you. These data points aren't to fix you. They're simply to keep the game going.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're those that are on the chat, if you do have questions, go ahead and post them there. I just put the word question at the beginning, and I will ask it. Okay, next one.
Yeah, the bottom. Yeah, we'll just scroll up. Yeah, so the future problem may not even be real. Again, they may make the prediction, and it's like the simulation is running reality, and that's the digital twin part. And then you get to speculate on what needs fixing. So the people who are setting up these deals are the ones who are going to decide which problems are fixable based on data dashboards and which aren't. So, I just had, like, when I was doing my research early on, there was something about child hunger. And the guy from the San Francisco Fed said, well, we haven't figured the cost offset for pay for success for child hunger yet, but maybe it would be test scores. And then a few years later, Shanxi City, which is IO2 Foundation, they were doing essentially, and this is all tied into the smart contract layer, scans of food deliveries, nutrition deliveries for children in China that was tied to a rural program linked with James Heckman, where the parent was supposed to scan with a phone the food delivery to confirm that they got it, and then link it to surveys about behavior and test score data and things that would be sorted by AI. So clearly they've already figured out how to link test score data to food, and that's what's coming next. And this is all about both, programmable money, but like in that, like the rice or whatever wasn't even money, but it is like a credit. It is like a commodity that's being tracked as an input. So, and then there's a third party that audits the system, because they want the appearance that it's fair. They want the appearance that it's real or that it is accountable. But then what's so silly is that oftentimes entities like Palantir, who have very close connections to policing, homeland security, defense contracting, and not just US, like they have contracts all over the world. They're the ones that are doing the evaluations. And so if you're someone for whom you don't necessarily want Palantir to have your Palantir's civil society engineers have all your data, like, you're out of luck, because they're the evaluators for two of these early pay for success finance programs, the Partners in Wellness Mental Health, and also the Welcome Home Social Impact Bond for housing insecure people. Those are both in the Santa Clara County area. And so then it's page 12, and a price is set on how much money was saved from the fix, and that's the return on the investment. So they've got, it's like a show. It's like, we cured post-traumatic stress disorder. And, so they've got these different impact measurements, and the various players, or like the finance firm Goldman Sachs, and veterans, and the philanthropists, and government. Like, it takes everyone. And that's the thing that's really vital for the libertarians to understand, and the anarcho-capitalists and all the people on blockchain. They think, oh, we're going to get the government of our business and it's going to be great. No, because the whole thing is integrated across all of the sectors, and the people at the top know that. Like Peter Thiel, he knows that. He knows what's going on. Like, being Mr. Conservative Rainmaker, it's ridiculous, because it's just all part of the charade that's happening.
Yeah, one thing I just thought about too is, I've done a lot of stuff on the Israel-Palestine situation, and they're always in a peace process for decades and decades. They're in a peace process, and I can't remember who said it, but some author who writes a lot about this said the peace process is the process by which they prevent peace from happening.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I think that relates to this too. And it's like hard for people to get the idea that they're not trying to find a cure. They're not trying to fix the problem. And I think it's just, that's a really difficult thing for people to acknowledge, and or even consider, because it's a dark view of like, I wouldn't say it's a dark view of humanity, but I would say it's a dark view of people who end up with power in this world, who are not, I would argue, who are not representative of humanity. They're it's a system, but that, it's a system that favors sociopaths and psychopaths who have no problem with like you said, breaking things in order to supposedly fix them later, but not really fix them. Anyways, I just thought that just came to mind as we were going through this.
It's not really meant to solve it. Like, so the governments pay out if they meet the metrics. If you want to go to the bottom there. And the big money, the big money is on trading the behavioral data and the futures markets. And that's the key, is that the next big short is on behavioral compliance, but they can bet both sides. And then they can use smart environments to like put their finger on the scale to get the outcome that they want. And then all the problems will continue to happen. They might be slightly ameliorated, but they'll continue to happen. And the data, the data will flow, and the AI will be trained. And so problem, reaction, solution. So you create the problems, you raise the rent, then you get homelessness impact bonds, and then you get smart housing. And that's what we were talking about. You add more bad stuff in the food, and then you give people diabetes, and then you give them a monitoring device for their pancreas. And so, within this, you can explode the economy and bring things down. And I think, Jason, you've talked in the past about, early on in all of this, people maybe on the left or the progressive side saying like, oh, look, it's the end of capitalism. Like, it's all falling apart. And now
late stage,
the people who are, the end stage. And I'm like, no,
LOL.
It's the transmutation. Like,
Right.
It's the digital capitalism. Like, it's even more repressive. But people, like, they need to live in the story that they want. Somehow they're like, see, look, it fell apart. And I'm like, no, they exploded on purpose to build the next thing. Like, it was a planned demolition. And I think at this point, maybe people understand, but a little better than they did 2 years ago. But it's very infuriating trying to convey this, that they have enough money to last whatever downturns, and they know that their long horizon is the 50 to 100-year horizon. So they're willing to sit and take short-term losses to get their ultimate outcome. And for this, it is the pure digitally simulated world. Like, that literally is what they imagine. I think they imagine in that pure digitally simulated world that they will be gods, these people. And there will be peace, and there will be, abundance, like Mark Andreessen, reality privilege. Like, everybody can have everything in the digital world. Only the problem is it's run by military behavioral psychologists, like to make you insane.
Yeah.
And so, it implicates everyone. And this is why I'm trying to do this, because I don't believe that most people get into caring professions to hurt people. They don't. They don't go into teaching, healthcare, social work, therapy, they don't do that to hurt people. I mean, maybe a tiny fraction of, but most people don't. And what's happening is that they are being harmed too, because the people offering the services are also going to be tracked as verticals in the impact spaces. So they're going to be put through all of their hoops. They're going to have to jump through their hoops, and they're going to be managed as impact commodities as well. So the churches and the charities, that's why we have to get it all together, and why the polarity stuff doesn't work is that we actually I think the conservatives have stuff to learn from the progressives, and the progressives have stuff to learn from the conservatives. And somewhere in the middle, like if we can hold on to our humanity and our aspiration to be better relatives to one another and nature, like we should be able to get there. And yeah, so the next big short is the derivatives, and that's like they've got a poker game going on in Las Vegas, and if you haven't seen the Big Short, like it's definitely worthwhile. They're able to convey it in a really accessible way, how these fictitious financial synthetic debt instruments happen. And they could just cook them up. They just cook them up like a recipe. Like there's actually not really much of a science to it. The only thing that's a science is that those in power all agree to play the game. And it's a good old boys network. They know each other. At the very, very top, there's not that many people involved, and they can all agree to play the game until eventually that game's over and the new game comes in. And we're at this pivot point right now.
Yeah, and I'll real quick. Someone had asked on the chat, what do we do? Do we lobby our politicians or warn regular people? We've talked a little bit about this, so I won't really go into detail. But I think it's completely pointless to try to lobby your politician. Once you understand the system, I don't believe there is a political solution within the system. And it's people want an easy answer of how we get there. And I think what needs to happen first. And again, I don't know what happens after that necessarily, but a large percentage, or at least I don't know what percentage, but people need to actually understand what the problem is, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to help educate people. So my advice in terms of what to do about it is to really educate yourself and try to educate others about what is actually going on, because they'll give you like that whole point of what a lot of what we're saying is they're going to give you false solutions to the problems that you see day to day. And if you don't understand what the actual problem is, there literally is no solution without acknowledging and understanding what's going on. And so it's not the answer that people want to hear. They want to be like, oh, make a donation here and call your representative and start a letter writing campaign, and then we're good. We're talking about something that's built up over hundreds of years, quite frankly. This is a continuation of colonialism, of slavery, of genocide. Anyway, so I just thought I would just acknowledge that question real quick. All right.
And I think some of it is being authentic. Like it is the messy stuff. Like it is the unexpected. It is, part of what I was writing a little bit about today was like I think there's like 6 different kinds of love. And one of them is like philia, like affectionate love. Like I feel like if we limit our understanding of what's happening to the material realm, like they have a lot of that locked down. And it's not necessarily a good versus evil, like, oh, all the people there are evil. Like the system is flawed. Like it's a toxic system. And no one group, maybe there are even some billionaires who would do it differently, but like they don't know how to do it on their own. Like we can't. So there has to be some tipping point that I think in terms of internal reflection about it. And, part of it I think is like the creativity, right? Like how do you use your gifts to process this message and then share it with other people? Like, I do my running around and with my little felt dolls and my rocks and things. And it's not quite as it's talented as these ink drawings, but that's how I express my creativity. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I think that there is, the people at the highest levels understood that there is a physics involved of energetics, of biophotonics, of your heart, this biological field theory. I don't understand it all. And I don't pretend that I do, but I think that as children of life, like we are connected to something bigger. And that if this is maybe some sort of cosmic test, like, do we show up and try to be real? Right? And then knowing that we mess stuff up, like knowing that this is like, I messed a lot of stuff up, but if we harden ourselves and become like these little non-playable characters, that's when they win. Like if we just keep looking down and don't look at the problem and just pretend like if we just don't look, it's going to go away. Like that's how the domination system continues. So if we can get up and look and say, I don't know how to fix all of this and I don't know who to go to, but as a human being, like I can say that this isn't okay. Do we agree that this isn't okay? Because most of it is so appalling that it only works if you agree to live inside the story they're selling. And if you just poke it a little bit, the whole story starts to fall apart. And if you can poke it and let it fall apart and not make the person who spun it the evil one, like not make them the enemy, and just say, hey man, like I know that this is the story you feel like you're telling because this is how you've been told, but I really don't think that like opening up people's hearts and putting a piezoelectric monitor and running the blockchain on that, like that I don't think that's a sacred way to be in the world. Like we need to figure out some other options. I think it could change. I literally do. And if we could get out of our prescribed boxes, things could change. But so many people, I think, are really, their identity is framed in opposition to someone else, to something else, to the thing that's not them. And we need to work through that. But that's not there's a lot of internal individual work that has to happen first.
Absolutely. And someone wrote, resist, defy, and do not comply. I also agree with that. Like, I think that the power of no, even if you don't know where to go after that, you're like, I think the concept of catch-22 in this system is relevant because, we're put into these impossible situations. Stand up for what your values are and risk your, not being able to maybe have a job or, have an income or whatever. Versus do what's right. So we're kind of put in possible situations. So, I'm sympathetic to, even people that are, part of the system, like actively making it happen. Even though I want them to say no. But like, I think
Right.
if people really knew what the consequences of what's going on, and it's really coming to a head, if they really understood what the consequences are, I think that the majority of people honestly would be taking risks in terms of saying, no, I'm going to resist, defy, do not comply. So yeah, we have a long ways to go, but again, step one.
Well, and I would say too, on the resist, like there's two ways because, and I appreciate Cliff's perspective on this, is like, I don't think you go to war against this thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think it actually wants you to go to war against it because in this energetic thing, like it feeds off of that.
Yeah.
It feeds off fear. So if there's a way of positioning yourself in your non-consent that is sort of more oblique or like the river around the rocks, like that I feel like that is a lens that might get us more to where we need to be than the animosity. Because what he was saying is like if you goad it, it's sort of it's like the force of the government or the military. Like they kind of want to provoke you to the point that they can come and squash you down. And so there's some sort of sweet spot in terms of the non-compliance that will invite people into the other story. And I keep saying, like, we need to tell the better story. So like maybe the next thing is, if somebody's out there that does illustrations, like maybe we come up with the counterpoint to this one, which is wonderful. And like the story that we want to walk into, that's the invitation, like the counterbalanced invitation.
Right. Okay.
So, okay, I think we did that. And yeah, so the currencies, we talked about this mining. There literally are, I mean, this 666 one, that's out there, but there's a lot of other ones. And like I said, the Jason was talking about the paper that Leo found about energy erasure and stable coins. And for me, like the potential of being linked to piezoelectrical stuff. This programmable money, the challenge is, I think we need to think about it as money, but we need to think about the tokens as more than money. And, I know that's something, Jason, that you've spent a lot more time on, is looking at the history of money and representations of money and what it really is. These tokens, freedom tokens, I think that they're going to be used as metadata tags. They're going to be used as tracking elements and predictive profiling elements, like in terms of aggregations of stacked tokens. Those tokens are going to be badges of skills on your mastery transcript. So everything is programmed, and essentially it's like living your life in a giant game of Mother May I, where Mother May I is like Hal the computer. And it's literally engineering you into some sort of like homeostasis aspect. And within this, like the tokens, it all has like the ones and zeros in the coding. And we don't even quite understand how any of this works. And they're throwing out all these tokens saying, not this token, that token, not this token, that token. And I think within all of the corruption of the tokens is the intent that eventually there will be one master token, right? Like there will be one master system running all of the tokens. For now, they'll all be chain linked and polka dotted or whatever together. But ultimately they want for there to be sort of like a giant network. I think there's going to be an in-between stage where there's going to be interoperability among them. But these things, it keeps, the power keeps concentrating. So, okay. And then, so decide everything, again, it's spending on food and drink, but it's also, tokenized votes, tokenized media, tokens for everything. And if you don't have the tokens, your tokenized rights, and this is early on, I found Israel is a leader in the space in terms of e-government, and they'll frame your rights and public benefits as tokens, right? If you're this age, if you're this income level, if you have this disability, then you get a token that unlocks options. And that's very much a gamified space. That's this gamified behavioral analytics space that's run on the tokens. And the tokens are binary, right? You either have the token or you don't have the token. You don't kind of have a token, or you can't argue with that. You can't say, well, I had the token last week, but I lost it. Or so, like, there's no one to talk to. It's just a machine. And so when this is all coming through, like there's an image, like if you don't comply, you will be cut off. Like that's the nosedive episode from Black Mirror, is you do one misstep and somehow you become reframed in the system, in the game, as something else, something other, where you could be doing everything just right. And then there's a cascade of events that through, something that would normally be rectifiable in this automated digital world, it just plummets, like your entire future just plummets. It's all tied to the concept of the token. And then, right. So the digital twins are important. It says to build this world, teams of dedicated coders are creating twins of everyone and everything. And this is very clever because it's sort of like they have the reality side and the metaverse side. And so the reality side is like the very sad side of like, this very depressed person, and then this hot person in the metaverse. Like no one knows you're a dog on the internet. Your town, this is Mark Andreessen, right? Not everybody can live in Venice, but like in the metaverse, you can. Like the town you live in, you may live in a little dumpy casita, pod city, but you could pretend in the metaverse that you're in a glamorous location. Your job, this terrible job that you have in the reality is better in the metaverse. Although I don't know, like I think that's going to be also a bad job in the metaverse. And that as you're competing for work, if you don't have the skills, if you don't have the token, then they're going to train you, right? That's going to be the thing. It's lifelong learning on the blockchain to train the AI. And then you'll go into debt through these income sharing agreements, which are being piloted in New Jersey with social finance on Ronald Cohen, these career impact bonds. And it's pretty much indentured servitude, like digital indentured servitude. And, eventually you'll get the next badge, the next token, and you'll be competing against 200 people for that job and you won't get it. And then by that time they'll say, oh, it's 6 weeks later. That skill isn't the most current. You need to update it and go into more debt. And that's how the income sharing agreements are. And that's why Ed Lee and Christopher Riccardi, who created the collateralized debt obligations, like he's really central to that. Like literally there's a Wall Street Journal article that says what Christopher Riccardi did to the mortgage market, he wants to do to education. And at the time, I thought this was for your college, but now clearly this is going to be these online learning classes and, up your social skills classes. And yeah, you've got Ronald Cohen in the mix and social finance and Christopher Riccardi, and these debt products are going to just track you your whole life. You're not going to ever be able to get out from under them. Okay. And then this bottom piece, and this is what I keep trying, and it shocks me that more people haven't picked up on this, is that this globalization 4.0 is this idea that through haptic robotics or platforms, you will be competing against everyone in the world with no labor protection to do remote work, whether that's, again, on a platform or through a robot. And where is organized labor? I mean, now we know, because clearly the whole organized labor thing for most of the 20th century was a total scam. But we were meant to believe that it actually was meaningful. But there's no one stepping up saying, no, we're not going to put our brain in robots. No, we're not going to do this thing. This idea that, you're going to compete in the image, cleaning toilets in the metaverse, and people from all over the world are competing to clean the toilets. And if to keep you going in between, you'll have this universal basic income. And that's going to be connecting you to, getting the data to feed the AI. And, that's Milton Friedman. That's the Chicago School's universal basic income. They want you to have enough to just scooch by and exist, and have to sell your data to them to survive, and to create systems. I'm sorry, my phone keeps ringing out there. To create systems that will track you permanently. So that's the, and I have a blog post that I wrote maybe 2 or 3 years ago talking about drones, the military drone programs, the bombings that were carried out. That's the early remote labor. And essentially the ed tech space, that's programming people for that kind of work. That's where it came from. It's a military game. And increasingly, you might not even know what's going on the other end of your haptics. You're in a haptic suit and you think you're cleaning a toilet, but maybe you're digging a mine. You might not even know what's happening on the other end. Maybe you think that you're, cleaning a hotel room, but you're fighting a war. That's what's so bizarre about this whole metaverse life. And I think what's going to lead us to just mass insanity. So, and again, it's not just going to be low-income people. It's going to be service jobs. It's going to be knowledge jobs. And there's it's lovely to have some drawings of this, the worker in the haptic suit waiting tables. And this is already going on in Japan. They have people who have severe disabilities who are confined to hospital beds or rehabilitation that are operating remote robots in cafes. And they're saying how rewarding it is for these people to be able to have a life and to live through a robot, which may have a grain of truth in it, because you don't want to, people do want to participate in society. But I can totally foresee that essentially a future where people have to work in the cafe to pay the rent on their hospital bed, right? Or the rent on their haptic suit to do the work. And then eventually, it's going to be soul killing.
Yeah. The thing about the labor unions that kind of blows my mind is that there's still kind of this belief that this technology is going to free up labor, and then they'll give us a UBI or whatever, and we're just going to be able to, have leisure and have an income, and the system is going to take care of us, and everything's going to be great. I'm like, really? You actually believe that? Are you insane? Are you insane? I mean, it sounds nice, but let's get real.
But the power, that's
the technology is not meant to free up labor.
No.
For you to have leisure, Well,
it's for them to lower the wages, but get the data, because the haptic suits are because literally they want embodied AI, and they need to actually capture our bodies and minds to embody it in their damn robots.
Right. Okay, I'm going to step away for just a second so you can keep it going. There you go.
Okay. So, I always say I started in the education space. I didn't realize that this was going to be about educating robots. But badges, I have a lot of articles and posts about badges. This is connected to the competency-based education, lifelong learning on the ledger. And the badges are going to be not just for the things but also for your soft skills. So this is great. It says jobs will be awarded to whoever has the most badges that will measure our worth. And so there's badges and tokens. Some of them are butt kissing, boot licking, sucking up levels, like leveling up Unilever, Hive Mind levels, the hero. I agree to lease my soul to Satan until I can pay my debts. These are the smart contracts and the NFTs. And so there are so many people out there who are thinking these NFTs are just like new ways of creating income streams for artists or creatives, and it's not. Like, they've known all along, that when I was doing my initial research, one of the key people in this, his name was Pavel Luksha, and he was with the Global Futures Forum, Global Education Futures Forum, GEF, and with Tom Vander Ark, who is the Bill Gates guy setting up digital learning. They were both in mining, which is really interesting because I think increasingly it's about crystallography and sort of photonic computing. And they were leading on these badges, right? They were talking about the badges. They had images of learners that were sort of isolated and surrounded by technology and like wearables and, smart contracts and tuition payments and reputation scores. And, I looked at it at the time and thought, this is bonkers. I hadn't shed a lot of my understandings of how the world really worked. And, now this is only maybe 5 years later, I'm realizing how close we are to it. So, we're talking about, needing to obtain the right badges, the skills. You're never going to get off the hamster wheel. And, this idea that you would have job security, there's not going to be job security. It's going to be short-term contracts. It's going to be remote work. A lot of this hinges on essentially getting to the place that there's automatic language translation. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are, like anyone will be able to understand you or your avatar. And, that's a lot of what's been connected to like the international baccalaureate programs and the global citizen programs. Again, I'm not a super nationalist, but I respect that there should be other cultures, other things, like we should respect each other, but they want global collaboration because they know that in the future, this remote work, avatar work, haptic suit robotic program is that you literally will be in a global setting wherever you do work. Now, again, I know people in other countries. I enjoy like collaborating or working or whatever, but it's the imperative. They know that it's these international teams that are going to be doing this. And then ultimately in the economic space, there are going to be no national economies anymore. Like the multinational corporations have taken over. It's silly to me to see these economists talking about predictions for national economies when they're all run by multinational corporations and multinational portfolios, and people are going to be like multinational workers through remote haptics. Like, what is actually a national economy in the metaverse mean anyway? Like, it starts to become meaningless except for your ability to agitate people and polarize them, because at the top they know everything is going in the metaverse.
Yeah.
And so the job training and education will be part of it. The Heckman equation, Jim Heckman, I've talked about him a lot. He's a Nobel Prize winning economist. He was the one who, in this social emotional learning conference that he had at the University of Chicago, when there was a guy saying like, we can't get the kids, he was like doing an app for PBS Kids. Like, we can't get the parents to get the kids to use the apps. Like, they never make time for it. And Heckman's like, oh man, like you just need a better incentive, like maybe pornography for those parents to get them, like to get the kids to use the apps, like a build a child game, and you incentivize it with pornography. And that's how they think of people. These are parents of children in Head Start, so people on fixed incomes. And it's about the ROI, right? Like the 7 to 10%, 13%. That's not crazy money, but for these philanthropies, for these community foundations, they can park that money in there and call it a day and say, pat themselves on the back for being good people. And within that, what Heckman has said is that they're unable to change cognitive scores on dashboards after the age of like 8 to 10 because the IQ hardens up. But what they can change is character. And so they're using these digital technologies to literally change how people's minds think and change their characters in ways that's measurable. This is all about measurable analytics on dashboards for the social impact finance deals. And another entity that people should look into is something called Ideas 42. Ideas 42 was pulled out of Harvard. It has like hundreds, if not thousands, of allied sort of applied sociologists and policy think tank leaders. And it's all about behaviorism and getting those measurements. So the social emotional learning thing is real. But the challenge is that many people, they've been polarized on the conservative side to only imagine that it's somehow Marxist trying to do brainwashing on their children. And they don't understand that it's actually about global financial markets and that it's about changing behaviors for the dashboards and for training the AI. And yeah, so this is the big 5 traits. Schools are now pushing social emotional learning, ranking students by their big 5 personality scores. I remember seeing these early webs. There's a lot of classroom economies, classroom gamifications for behavior management. And these are tokenized economies, PBIS, an early intervention to manage children with bad, like challenging behaviors. And they have challenging behaviors because essentially the classroom environments have been made super toxic and to drive the children crazy and then penalize them for acting out in very like human ways, largely. The children are being monitored with this technology, including like the surveillance play tables that I talk about, Hatch Education, with facial and voice recognition and managing. They want to know not just what you know, but who you are. And, people like me, dissidents, people who are asking questions that are counter to the main narrative are not going to be well scored in the digital identity space. And it's going to be prenatal. Like a lot of the stuff that's happening now in terms of home visits, prenatal, looking at health disparities, particularly for Black and brown women. The healthcare that they're going to get is telemedicine. It's going to involve a lot of radiation and a lot of wearable devices and tracking and consumption of digital media, because they need to actually capture the minds of the mothers and disassociate it away from the natural world and the natural birthing process into the cybernetic enclosure. And so the graphic, the zine says, even little babies need to watch their backs both in and out of the womb. And she mentions the welcome leap, the first 1,000 days, and that it's linked with the Wellcome Sanger Institute that's tied to eugenics. And I've been writing a lot about eugenics lately, not just at Cold Spring Harbor Labs, but also the Human Betterment Foundation, which was the West Coast office in California. And the data for the compliance will all be added to the digital wallet, to your digital identity. And my friend with whom we collaborated to create the NAACP resolution opposing digital identity to access public benefits. She was at a blockchain webinar, like it wasn't a webinar, actually, I think it was way back when things were still in person, but it was about, they were selling the idea of blockchain. And she said, while on some respects you could maybe use it for things like lettuce heads, essentially every little problem, like if the lettuce falls off the truck or falls on, like there's damage, then that damage data will go onto it as well. And so anything that is harmful to children along the line will become part of that permanent record and part of the predictive profiling. And eventually your predictions about you will become reality, and it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy and part of the feedback loop. So it says, so if the social credit system is in the world you want to live in, great. But it has kind of a dystopic, the grocery store with drones going over with the facial recognition squares and sort of, I guess, checking like how if you're doing right thinking, if you're thinking about pornography, or if you're thinking about Jesus, and scoring you, and that you have to have a certain score to enter to get food. But then it says, if you don't want to live in a digital prison, let's figure things out. And that's where we're at now, is that we have to actually figure things out, and it has to happen across the board. And these little, the open air digital prison is represented as these hexagons, which is very much graphene and the hive mind. And
I just have one thing. I know this person that's religious, and they're thinking about Jesus, has a low score. I'll just point out that a lot of the churches are actually actively involved in this thing. So, your faith is not necessarily going to give you a low score, because again, the churches play a major role in this. I just thought I would point that out. That I don't know. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
I just think it's important to recognize that
Remember,
the churches are part of this as well.
well, and I would say too, like there's the difference between, and I had a conversation with someone yesterday about this, like institutionalized religion and not just Christianity, but broadly, and faith, because I think they're not, they can be congruent, but they don't have to be. And so what I've been asking people, because a lot of these social impact deals are actually, like, churches have endowments. The Vatican has a large endowment. Like, I think the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has maybe an even larger endowment than the Vatican. Even things like socially progressives, the Unitarians, like, they're investing their money in these ESG products. And I'm trying to say, hey, like, you need to know if there's surveillance play tables behind them, like what is actually happening. You can't just go on the superficial level and trust that it's going to be good. So, like, people of faith, again, across faith practices, I think it's important to have faith, but then also to, if you are part of an institution, hold them accountable, like ask the hard questions. Because like, I'm not willing to totally give up on that, but I think many of them have been pulled in, intentionally so, because even over the past 20 years, like, think about how many religions have been framed as primarily negative, right? Oh, Islamic terrorists, right? All those people are terrorists. Or, all Christians are radical right racists. Like, I think labels have been intentionally applied in sort of very loose, broad ways, because it is that if you believe that there is something beyond the material that you're willing to make grave sacrifices for, that's the thing that is very destabilizing to the system, because that's something that they can't actually calibrate into the machine, I think, is where I'm at. So anyway, that's my perspective on it. And I think, and so this is sort of the end. It says, or at least make it more consensual. So I'm not really sure how the smart contract life can be consensual. Part of it is I feel like that's why I want to frame it as the web, that we need to be talking about the web, because once the smart contract layer is put in place, this is being run from outer space. This is being run by drones. It's not just affecting people. It's affecting trees. It's affecting bees. It's affecting, microbes. Everything is going to be covered in nanotechnology and used for biophotonic purposes. It's, the conversation I'm trying to have with, like, Lincoln Cannon at the Mormon Transhumanist Conference, saying, like, leave space for us to be out of it. It's not really realistic. It's a totality. It's a totalizing system. So that's why we have to talk about the smart contract layers. And so yeah, follow the truth. How to follow the truth, even if it conflicts with your beliefs, starting with you. So again, be grounded in your beliefs. Be on guard for moral relativism. Like, it's okay to do wrong things under special circumstances. Talk to people locally in person. Use cash, or make your own cash and use it with your neighbors. And that's something that was used largely, again, during the Depression. People had their own, and it doesn't have to be on blockchain. Like, you can use oyster shells or whatever. Like, you could, that's based on real trust, not blockchain trust. Limit or eliminate use of smart devices. Don't allow them in or on your body. And again, I would say that might be easier said than done, because I think we actually are sort of imbued with the frequencies and the nanoparticles. But that's not to say that we shouldn't avoid all that we can. And then learn how to defend yourself legally, physically, and spiritually. And there's more, but that's a good starting point. And it says it doesn't have to be our future, our children's future. It will be so if we allow it. And there's sort of like the closing image is the devil and the monopoly money man going out of business, and they have the Alexa and the microchips and the spyware, and everyone's like just being friendly and being connected outside the everything must go sales store. And so, yeah, so I think we still have to hold on that there is space to be other, that we're here in this time. It's kind of crazy that we even have to talk about any of these things, but we do. And, along the way, you if you can stand in your truth, if you can, hold on to that and speak that in a way that is, doesn't kill your soul, right? That you can find a way to use your creativity like Eve did and spread the message and have hope. I think there is something about the energetics that we draw people to us. And so not everyone will come, but I think you do like attracts like. And so if you have integrity, if you have care, if you can embody that, you'll find good people along the way. And and I've had it happen to me. People unexpectedly, like being part of my life and enriched my life a lot. So thank you, Eve. This was this helped get me over the hump. I've had, it's been a bit bumpy month. So it's really nice. It's really nice to know that you never know, like the seeds that we plant, where they will show up. It's like the dandelion, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was a really nice surprise to see that come out. So, yeah, thanks for going through that with us, everything. Did we
Yeah.
want to talk about the forum a little bit, or I know there were some other topics that we wanted to kind of cover about. Um,
Well, I mean, I don't know how you're feeling. I know you look a little snuffly. I don't
yeah,
want to
I'm
do
all
it.
right.
Maybe you could just give a little pitch, like just like 5 minutes. We can just
Yeah, well,
for
I
you
mean,
to show what it.
you guys already kind of know. It's been kind of a process for me because I'm trying to walk this line of, you know, uh, trying to create a space that's a little bit more intentional and conscious and I don't know the word. Uh, yeah, if you actually look, let me bring it up here real quick. Let's see here. Boom. I might have to make some adjustments here so you guys can see. Let me just move this over. We'll just do that. There we go.
Yeah, that
That'll work.
works.
Um, but if you guys go on here, and oh whoops, this is what I wanted to do. Boom, there's the website. If you haven't had a chance, go on here and just take a look, and you'll read it. Some of the content that's been being posted, and I'm pretty happy. Our group is still pretty small here, and again, I'm being very selective about who can join the group, but everybody can read the thing. And if you do want to join it, we would love to have you. Just like I said, we've got some guidelines and rules that I'm trying to stick with. But if you go through here, you'll see like the content. Like there's some really great content that's already being put up there. So like Allison was posting a lot of stuff on Twitter that was a lot of times just a placeholder, like, oh, I want to keep track of this. So she was using Twitter for that, and then when she got off Twitter, there wasn't really a place for that. And I'm like, I actually got a lot of use out of it. I would follow some of the links and check out some of the PDFs that she would post on there, and so this is a place for both her, Leo, others, Steffers, Jen, to as we come across things to share it. And the nice thing is, you can actually search, we have a search thing where you could search by different, we're tagging different things. Hold on.
Ooh, can you show the tagging page? I love all the tags.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you pull that up? Is it in
Oh,
the hamburger thing? Whatever. Like,
oh,
isn't
you
there
know
like
what?
under users tags?
Yeah, it's tags. You're right. Okay, I've never even looked at this.
Yeah, like I love that. I just love seeing all the stuff that we cover. Like that gives
Yeah.
you, I mean, if you go to the tags page, like the kinds of things that we're interested in.
So this has only been up for a couple, 2, maybe 3 weeks, and already this is all the tags that. So like if you wanted to, so in the future, like if you're trying to do research about MIT as it relates to this, you can click on this. Julian Huxley, Lego, indigenous worldview. There's all these tags. So it's kind of a way that we can kind of collect and compile information and help us to kind of construct what's going on. And yeah, I'm pretty happy about it. Like I said, but we would like, if you're interested in joining, I have what, I didn't create a link for that. I should create one, but it's hold on, wrench. Hold on one second. Do you want to say something, Allison, about it?
Oh, I'm curious because I can't see any of the whatever the commenters. Like, is there anyone that's on there that has feedback? Like maybe who isn't a member but has been looking at it? Because some of the stuff that we have up there is a little esoteric. So I'm just curious if other people find it interesting. Like it's a very like it's a deeper dive, I think, than a lot of the stuff that we have out there. And I think what I really appreciate about it is even though it's small, there are people who think about things the way I do, and I really crave, like, especially being like, since there's not people locally who are like on the same page, like the opportunity to bounce ideas off of, or sort of to collaborate or ask, like, this is how I'm seeing it, like, do you see it this way? And I think that was a nice thing about Leo's post this morning. Like, he was sort of tagging us and saying, I think this fits with the energy economy that we're looking at. Like, Jason, I think this might fit with how you think about money. What do you think? And then we could have this a bit of a back and forth and add some new material, and other people can chime in. And so while it's not as you don't get the weird dopamine rush of like, oh, I had 50 clicks, likes, or whatever. It's a different kind of satisfaction of like working through some really like, this material is super challenging, right? Like radiation hormesis and salutational evolution, like, that's a lot, but you don't have to do it alone, and different people have their own different angles that they're bringing in, and then we sort of educate each other along the way. And it's just stuff that's I feel like we're all called to be on our own journey in this, and we enrich each other's thinking. But
Yeah, and
I don't know if it is
Okay.
other people.
Yeah, and I'm even having to like challenge myself too. It's like, it's not like your typical social media where you see a link, you see a video, and you just share it, or you make some off comment or whatever. But like trying to get myself and others in the group to say, hey, if you find a piece of thing, like, just dig a little bit deeper. Like, I have a post where like I started out with like, it was a Ford Foundation video, and then I'm like, oh, who's this person in it? Oh, what's this company? And then like I did a little, I was doing research, and it took longer to create that post. It was like when I would create a post. Hold on one second. When I create a post, I'll spend a couple hours or more on it. So this isn't a thing of just like, oh, whatever.
It's a resource.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Like, it'll be there for later. It's almost like a mini article. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of the idea here, is that we're a little bit more intentional, and it really, it's called a working group. So it's those of us who are actually interested in working together. You think about it. I always talk about this like a think tank. How they can advance their narratives and certain understandings of, usually propagandistic, but they have all these think tanks, and that's what they do. They're like working groups, but they're paid for by foundations or corporations to push a particular ideology, or with a certain mission or goal. And the people that work in those think tanks are paid. They have salaries. And so we're trying to create the same thing, but with a more pure intention, and with people that aren't getting a salary. So it's a little bit more difficult, because you're asking people to dedicate time into something. So yeah, it's a little bit different, but we're creating our own little working group here is what it is. I'm looking at the comments here to see if there's I'm not really seeing any comments about that, but people are saying that they'll look into it. I will just show this. This is the oh, I need to like resize that. Hold on one second. Go, Alison. Pick up. Or you can say talk. Okay. I got a cough.
Well, I know, poor Jason. Like we really appreciate you like trying to work your way through your cold. So again, I would just say like I think we've sort of moved on to a bit of a new phase. All of us, like, we're trying to wean ourselves away from the pre-crafted algorithmic social media. We're still trying to hold on to some sort of social connections that can provide some meaningful opportunities, and just working to be really thoughtful about how to tell the story. And I feel like, narrative warfare is tough. I would hope, the first year I was hopeful, and then I got less hopeful, and then finally I've sort of pulled out. And I think for me, we're just the dandelions. The dandelion thing really resonates. And I would say I had a lovely thing happen. A friend shared an image that the friend from upstate New York, she had made this really nice the dandelion PDF with the different phrases underneath, and one of them was "The revolution will not be tokenized." And it had ended up in a university all the way like in England. And I don't know this person, and this person actually printed it out and put it on their office door, and they were, at a university in a department that was really relevant to all these issues. And so you just don't know where the seeds are that you're planting. And yeah, so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this seed. I'm grateful to Jason for creating the space for us to work together, and I hope people will get some utility out of it. And I don't know, were there any open general questions from? I mean, most of this was sort of a going over of things people are probably already know about us, but I think it actually, thanks to Hege, our friend Hege in Tulsa, she shared it out, and it ended up like getting several hundreds of views in Norway. Like most of the day today, like my blog post was trending. I put this on a blog with the images from Norway more than the United States. So that's a first. So thanks, Hege. Like the Norwegians are clued in. And I think that they're, from what Hege said, they've been very signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals and sort of social progressivism. So but they mean well. They just don't know. They just don't have the information. So having this circulate is a good thing.
Someone has, hold on. All right, catching up with me here. Someone has a question off topic. Post the question, and I'll let you know if it's too off topic. But yeah, if it fits, I'll ask the question. So I was just going to say is I am kind of screening people. We absolutely want people to participate in this forum and to be a part of it. But I am trying to get people that, first of all, have a basic understanding of what we're talking about. The forum's available for anybody to view. And if you're still learning and you're not like, you don't have to know all the things. I'm still like, a lot of the posts is like totally new stuff for me, but I'm actually putting the time in to try to like learn it, but I do have I set up a questionnaire. There we go. I set up this questionnaire, and I'm going to add more questions to it as well, because as I've been getting people filling it out, is that not showing up on the screen?
It's up in the corner.
Oh, wrong one. Okay, boom. So I forget how I had this thing set up. So wrenchinthegears.org. So Alison's blog is .com, but this is .org. wrenchinthegears.org/questionnaire. And it's a form you can fill out where you just give me some of your information, and then it asks you a few questions. And then what I'll probably do is do a phone call with you and find out a little bit about kind of where you're at, what your understanding of this is. And there's a little process, but if you do want to participate, we would love to have you. So that's a way to do that.
You want to just go over the questions that just.
Oh yeah, sure.
Just quick.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm going to add some questions because like some of the forms I've gotten back didn't tell me everything that I wanted to know, which I've been filling in with the phone call. But the question is, share any websites or blogs you're associated with. How did you hear about the working group? Do you know anybody that's currently a member personally? Just some interests and areas of expertise. And I'm going to add like related to what we're doing. But I guess not necessarily because... and then the forum guidelines and rules. And I should put a link on here to that. I'll do that this afternoon. Oh, I do have it at the bottom here. But I also want to add another question related to, what is your understanding of what it is we're facing? So the head of the forum, I wrote, this is a forum for, this is a group forum for investigating cybernetic governance, behavioral economics, and the synthetic transformation of life. And that was like the best I could do, at least for now, in terms of distilling it down to like what it is we're talking about. So that's kind of, I'm hoping that people, I'm kind of insisting that people that join the forum at least have a basic understanding of like there's this thing called the Web3, and there's this, impact finance that's changing the way money and aid is going to operate. Again, you don't need to know all the things, but I kind of want people to have a basic understanding of that. And then again, we have some forum guidelines and rules, so just read through those. And if that sounds like something that you'd like to participate in, awesome. If not, not a big deal. It's available. You can still go to the website and read it. You can just follow it, even if you
There's
aren't
a lot
participating.
there.
There's a ton there. And then I'll also say too, like, let's say you're not even interested in what it is we're doing, which you should be, but I don't know why you'd be watching this video if you're not interested in what you're doing, but what we're doing. But I think everybody should do this. Like, people need to move away from social media. And so, like, even if you have a knitting club or whatever, and you're using Facebook to do your knitting club or whatever, there are things like this discourse, and it's not that big of a learning curve. There's in fact, if you want to pay them, they'll do it for you. It's a little pricey if you pay the companies to do it. Like, the company discourse will do it for you for, like, I think minimum $100 a month, which is expensive, but it's actually pretty much free if you just get hosting. You just have to pay for the hosting. So, for $10, 10 or $20 a month, you could host your own forum and start building your own community. But imagine that if everybody just, like, started walking away from the Twitters and these controlled spaces and start, building your own spaces. I think that would go along. And, in terms of solutions, that's a real concrete thing people could do right now. And like I said, even if it's not a research group like this, if it's a cooking club or, your business or whatever, people need to get off of these controlled big tech social media spaces. Yeah. And there's tons of, there's tutorial videos and stuff online about how to set up. But I kind of like Discourse. Of all the ones I found, I thought that was kind of the best. But there's other, like, they're just forums, like bulletin board forums. But I encourage people to actually do that. Let me just take a look at the chat real quick and see if there were any other questions or comments about that.
Poor Jason.
I'll survive. It's actually not. It's just a cold. I mean, it's a little sore throat, a little stuffy, but it's not that bad. It's just kind of irritating. But I'm not seeing any.
All right.
I'm
Well,
not
it wasn't
seeing
a lot of
anything.
new territory. We're just placeholder. It's next Thursday, right? Next Thursday, we're going to be talking with Leo.
Yeah, I haven't created the link for y'all, but yeah, next Thursday we are doing. What time is that? I don't even remember what time we're doing it at. I'll have to check.
I don't know. So Leah's been doing some work on parametric insurance, which is these new kinds of insurance products, but it's linked to like, he's been specifically focusing a lot on ecology and sort of the history of the ecological movement and these ecological economics and the energy economics, and how a lot of it's tied to the nuclear energy, nuclear fallout, weapon systems. And so we're going to have an interesting conversation, I think, both about these automated insurance products and some use cases and how it relates to this earlier history of the ecology movement, which most people would have no idea that it's actually connected to the Atomic Energy Commission. Definitely keep an eye out on that for next Thursday.
Yeah, and it'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Is that right? Does that sound right?
I forgot to look.
Yeah, I think it's 2 p.m. Eastern time. But check the YouTube channel. I'll have a link up later on today. I'll create the link. There was someone that wanted to ask a question though, so I want to just real quick and look and see the off-topic one. I'm not seeing. Whoever had that question about off-topic, if you want to repost it, so I don't know. I'm not seeing it, but there is a question that off-topic question, Kimba. I keep getting led back into the story about Amerigo and the Indians of the Chesapeake Bay. Do you know any good material surrounding that?
Oh, no. I don't know that. That's interesting. But I do think that the Chesapeake Bay is sort of an extension of the Susquehanna River, and like is it Michael Wan and like Roz Ben did a really interesting podcast on the power, because the Susquehanna River is very old, and the different sort of imprints along the Susquehanna, including going all the way down to the Chesapeake with Jamestown, and sort of the connection between like Sir Walter Raleigh and John Dee, and then up to Aberdeen, which is a signals intelligence center, and Three Mile Island, and then further up, like, which is where Joseph Smith translated these tablets. So if you haven't seen that podcast on the Susquehanna, I would check it out. And at one point, this is just incidentally, but I was at an activism event like 3-4 years ago, and I had someone like asking me if I was a time traveler, which was a bit odd. It was like, and just took me aback. But he's like, I'm Nanticoke, and we're very mystical, and I think the Nanticoke are also in the Chesapeake. So yeah, I'll have to look that up. I'm not familiar with it, but I think there is some big energetics around the Susquehanna and the Chesapeake Bay. Hear you.
Oh shit! Oh, sorry. I was coughing. Someone asked, maybe we're lip readers or whatever. Someone asked if you would be willing to talk with or debate someone with opposing views, like a hardcore technocrat MIT person like Peter Hirschberg, for example, or a Google VP or engineer. And I would just say this. Like, what's the point? Like, the information that's been put out there is so immense. Like, if you look at the content that from Alison's blog, from all the videos and presentations that she's done, the position is very clear. And so my question is, like, let's say we're back at the 200 years ago, and you said, well, would the abolitionists want to, do you think the abolitionists should have to debate the people that are pro-slavery? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, no, it's not. Like, I'm not going to spend my time debating someone that's promoting something that is clearly, we've shown to be profoundly unethical. And, there may be some strategic things. Like, I'm actually willing to engage a little bit with people that are in the space that are, like, for example, in the crypto space, because a lot of people in that space genuinely their values are actually incongruent with what they're actually doing. But a lot of people are just, this is their career, this is what they're doing, and I don't see any point whatsoever in debating them. Just like I don't see any point in writing your congressperson or your senator. Like, I don't see any point in that at all. Like, it's a waste of time. And then somebody said, oh, they won't do that because they're disingenuous. Guess what? That person I just deleted off the channel because I don't know why you're here. Why are you even here? If you don't care about what we're doing and you think we're disingenuous, why are you even listening to us? So goodbye.
Exactly.
I mean, this is ridiculous. It's been
the thing is like some of this stuff is that the technicians want to have a technical debate. Like, what they will do is they will come in and they'll say, like, I have some nuanced understanding of some protocol that you can't possibly understand. So, like, I can dismiss you. And the reality is that there's two parallel stories going on, right? There's the pure, pristine, clean, digital world story that certain people are inhabiting. And then there's the maybe, the organic, potentially like chaotic, but I think if you zoom out far enough, it's not really chaotic, like composted natural world, right? And those are two choices of what to live in, right? I'm not going to debate the person who's going to say, I think reality privilege sucks and is racist and everyone should live in the internet. Because there's no point. They've already decided that that's the story that they're going to live in. And the likelihood that I'm going to pivot them off that story, it's unlikely. And it really just simply, a lot of times at least I found in the blockchain space, we're not getting money off of this, but people like to foment polarization, it's a polarization thing. And like the media uses the polarization to get clicks, to trigger emotions, to do this. It's not a level-headed discussion. And so I think, again, we've provided so much material. You guys have to figure out, like, do you want to live in the pure white digital simulation world space? And if so, like, then you're about blockchain and Web3 and digital twinning, and you're going to hope that the military video game is kind to you and will let you live a happy life, like in that matrix. If you don't want that, that's just a different choice. And, I find it always ironic in these spaces that tend to be all about freedom is that they do kind of want to police the choices people make. So,
you know what? I actually need to correct myself here. Because I've been rereading this, and I was reactive. Sorry.
Triggered.
Yeah, I got triggered. I'm like, God damn it! So I think I might have misunderstood this person. I unhid them from the channel, but I just unhid them again. So hopefully they'll come back. But
all right.
But here's the thing. We've had a lot of people attack us on this. So they said, just my 2 cents. They won't go for it. They're disingenuous at best, and willfully ignorant at worst. I thought they were talking about us, but the person might have been talking about the technocrats. So anyways, I apologize.
I mean, the thing is, like, I think they're literally occupying a different story. Like, I don't know how much of it is willingly or unwillingly. Like, literally, they're living in a different reality. And so to pull someone out of that and then offer them uncertainty, because the only thing that we have in the organic space is, it's uncertainty, but it's authenticity, right? Like, hopefully there's some love mixed in there, or some camaraderie, or some like reality. But it's hard. Like, people, like the people don't want to step into your space, because when you do, they feel like there's going to be nothing there to catch them. And everyone has to find their own way to be in that new space. Like, for me, over the winter, early spring, like, I spent too much time online and I got in a dark place. But like, being out in the Susquehanna, or in the Shenandoah, and going in the woods and collecting acorns, and like, that's still real. Like, I'm still being able to be connected to that realness. And, for me, I think the issue of informed consent is so central. And the fact that, like, it's one thing for an adult person in a reasonable state of mind to make their own decision, but these decisions are being made for the next generation, for the unborn, for the children, for the other sibling beings in this world. And like, I don't think that's right. Like, I don't think that we should be taking liberties with their other forms of life to modify them as biomaterials. Like, it's just, and I really do hope, like, I'm just going to put the call out to the people out there who are like having a very narrow conversation about crypto, who want to just like limit their conversation to like, oh, I don't like, this is a grifter, or, this is, I don't like this kind of NFT or whatever, to like dig in. Like, this is the thing. This is the digital twin. This is the soul-bound token. This is your representation in this video game. And it's going to be for everyone. So it has to be a more holistically understood structure. People have to interrogate the structure and then the parts, but don't limit yourself to just the small parts, because that's how the narrative warfare plays out.
Yeah. And again, I want to apologize to Mike Jones. I kind of reacted to that, but we've actually been attacked on that quite aggressively and consistently on that thing of like, why aren't you, debating these? Why aren't you connecting with these people?
I didn't listen to it, but like Derek Bros and Greg Carlwood came out against me again, like recently. Like, I haven't even talked to those people in like 4 months, 5 months, like, get over yourselves. Like, clearly, there's something that they haven't settled. Like,
right.
This whole white hat crypto, black hat crypto, like, I'm not buying it, guys. Like, you're either agreeing to live for everything in the world to live in a militarized web, or you're not. Yeah.
And if you're committed to the digital smart tech crypto thing or whatever, it's you need to figure it out. We have lots of content that you can look at. You can check out our new discourse forum. There's lots of information there.
Yeah, you should see the whole thing with the like opened up rats with the piezoelectric energy sensor things being stuck in. And they're like, yeah, hey, we did it with the rats. Now we can do it with people next. And I'm sure they'll link it up to like heart
Was
monitors or
that the
something and
Walter
say, oh,
Russell one?
I think it was the stable coin. I think
Oh, was it?
like that's the Raytheon stuff. It's the
Oh,
one
yeah, yeah.
Leo. It was the sunrise. Yeah, if you go to the very bottom, like click that one and run to the bottom, like with the rat thing. It's really it's there.
Oh,
It is.
yeah.
Like, can
Oh,
you make it
yeah,
bigger?
yeah. This is really gross. It looks gross, but what they're doing is, you want to explain what this is here?
Yeah. Well, essentially, what they're trying to do is like, can you make it? Can you expand it at all? Like the rat
Uh,
thing. Maybe
Let me
not.
see here.
That's okay. You
Yeah.
can see the little rat up there, and they're putting. You see biofuel cell and uh, tunable wires and plugs and connectors. And so what they're trying to do is they're essentially inserting these flexible um, uh, like energy, like I guess if piezoelectric is like a tap or a compression. And so they're literally trying to harvest energy off of things like your swallowing, your heartbeat, your blinking with these nanowires. And so in this case with rats, they're putting them in. And I think, they'll talk about it in a dual use way, like, oh, you need power to run your heart monitor. So we're just going to tap, put this little postage stamp thing in there. But I don't think it's ultimately going to be limited to just health things. Like, they're going to turn us into their batteries. And, listen, I'm challenging all y'all RFK Jr. supporters out there. This is your alternative energy. This is your green energy right here. Okay. So Mr. Vantage Point Capital Partners, why don't you take this and you show this to him and say, this is where this is going, dude. Is this what we're doing? Like, is this what you're green? Like, we're going to put people who use up too much of their carbon allowance in jail or what have you. This is what's the opposite of that. This is where it's driving. So we have to deal with this reality.
So hopefully
And this
that
is not being a good relative. It's
I was able
disgusting.
to get it and make it bigger, but hopefully you guys can see that. But yeah, there's this rat with a plug in its head, a connector, and this is a real thing. Like, this is, you can see these are images. They did the surgery on this rat, and we're the rat. Crazy.
Doesn't it look so green? Thank you, Greta.
How dare you?
Yeah.
All right.
So
Okay, that's gross.
sorry, but yeah. So, but this is just like, just scroll back through. Like, this is like, because we had a pretty active, like, there's the PDF links. I mean, just, yeah, I have one of my maps that I put up, like, with some material that I've been working on that's related to the energy credit economy. And again, yeah, you can talk about your MasterCard being tied to a carbon credit, but what really matters is if you can take it back to the world banks and these earlier systems of the ecology and the carbon cycles and the Odom brothers and the Atomic Energy Commission. That's where it gets more complex.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, join us, and thanks everyone for listening to us. I think we've been going for a couple, 2 or 3 hours. 3 hours.
I know. I can never do it short. Well, thank you, Eve. Again, this really means a lot to me. This helps keep me going. This is like these personal connections. And thank you, Jason, for holding space, for your technical support, even with the sniffles.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'll be 100% by next week's live stream. So I'm just looking to see if there were any other questions or relevant comments. I think we're good. All right, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks a bunch. Until next time. Bye. Let me end the stream.